The sun disk rotated, flew back into Hura's hands and shrank rapidly, disappearing together with Hura's real body in the sky. As for Phoenix, her body had been completely annihilated. The only survivor, Hura's projection breathed a sigh of relief. In order to defeat Phoenix, he really spent a great amount of his god power. Summoning the sun disk from the distant western god's domain, struck a blow that could even destroy an entire world and restrained its power within the range of the battlefield. It was too risky, as if he was performing on the tightrope. However, holding the sacrifice, the golden red gem in his hand, Hura laughed happily. It's worth it. Everything's worth it. Even though he still didn't know what the golden red gem was, just holding it in his hands, his heart had been somehow quieted down. To Sunwalkers, the most difficult thing was not to obtain stronger power, but to control the power they had obtained. The Sunwalkers who couldn't control their own power couldn't descend into the mortal world, because their bodies were enveloped in endless solar storms, which would burn all living beings on the earth to ashes. The treasures that were effective for Sunwalker was extremely rare, and the unknown golden red gem in Hura's hand was undoubtedly one of the rarest treasures that could be used by Sunwalkers. Hura was very satisfied with the sacrifice and decided to offer the twin witches a true god's blessing. He went to the Door of Dusk and started to communicate with the twin witches on the altar of deity. We succeeded. A god is coming. White Lotus opened her eyes. From the other side of the Door of Dusk, an unusually hot breath was spreading to this space. The burning power partly broke through the unopened door, making the temperature around the altar to rise significantly. There was no doubt that their sacrifice attracted a very powerful existence attention. However, they still didn't know whether it was a kind god or an evil monster. The only thing they knew was that this god or monster was far stronger than the fire-type fantastic creature they summoned the last time. The next stage was the most important part of the sacrificial ceremony. They must determine whether the strong existence on the other side of the door was good or evil. Before they opened the Door of Dusk, they could ask the god 3 questions, and the 3 questions were the core of the sacrificial ceremony. If it was an evil monster and they didn't find its true identity, they may pay the price with their lives. The god they summoned could choose to answer the questions or remain silent, and the witches would deduce who the god was from the god's attitude. Generally, it wasn't a big problem, because witches had had rich experience in how to ask the 3 questions. They even had the safest template in theory. Great God, where did you come from? In the face of a god, White Lotus great circulation would be useless, because it wouldn't be able to predict anything about a god. Therefore, the first thing she asked was the question most commonly asked by witches. I'm from the end of the western desert, above the earth where the pyramids stand. I am the Lord of the Sky, the embodiment of order and truth, the infinite light. After killing Phoenix, well, at least, killing her temporarily, Hura was in a very good mood and declared his identity frankly. Gee. White Lotus covered her little mouth with a look of total disbelief. How could this be true? Although his name did exist on the witches' list of kind gods, however, he never responded to any witch's call before. On the list, he was one of the top 5 gods the witches were able to summon. He was a real ancient god. The Lord of the Sky, the sun god, Hura Azda. He was one of the oldest gods. Before the endless gods' domains were connected together, he was already the master of hundreds of gods' domains. In theory, if a witch wanted to summon him, the witch must prepare hundreds of fire-type cryolites. Only in this situation, the strong sun god may pay attention to the sacrificial ceremony. In the rules of the sacrificial ceremony, the summoned gods or monsters could choose to keep silent and ignore the 3 questions. However, if they answered the questions, they must tell the truth. Hura Azda had no intention of hiding his identity, therefore, the other 2 questions White Lotus prepared had become meaningless. Well, are you satisfied with the sacrifice? Looking at her sister, who was in a trance, Red Lotus quickly asked the second question. In the normal process, the question would be, what are you? However, Hura Azda had directly declared his identity. This question was meaningless now. I'm very satisfied. I will give you a wonderful blessing from a real god. Holding the golden red gem in his hand, Hura Azda promised in a pleasant mood. Everything went smoothly. Yunshi was relieved. It seemed that this was a very kind and talkative god. Well, in this case, can I also ask a question? Great God, what is love? Then, Yunshi regretted his impertinent question many years. Oh, love. Hira Azda was in a very good mood today, and he felt that Yunshi's voice was pleasing, therefore, he didn't mind giving this lost sheep his advice. You should love the people you like. Love is selfless, free, and should not be bound by any rules. If you love your child, you should marry her. You can marry your daughter, your elder sister, and your little sister. I bless all beings who have love in their hearts. If you love her, you shouldn't mind her race or identity. If you love her, you should marry her immediately. You need to protect her and let her become the happiest bride in the world. You should dress her in the most beautiful bridal dress with your hands and tell her that she belongs to you. Yunshi felt that his world outlook was totally subverted. Is this what love is in the eyes of a legend-ranked god? What the hell are you asking? Red Lotus looked at Yunshi with discontent. The sacrificial ceremony must be dealt with carefully. Any error would make them pay a heavy price. At any rate, Mei shouldn't ask the last question. It's totally irrelevant to the god. What a layman she is. Sorry. I suddenly wanted to know what love is in the eyes of a god. Yunshi lowered his head embarrassed and apologized sincerely. However, the answer from this god had been unconsciously impressed in his heart. So, is this what love is to a god? Please come through the door, great god. White Lotus was also satisfied with the sun god's answer. No witches would refuse to accept the blessing of the ancient sun god. If the noble families knew that it would be the sun god who responded to the sacrificial ceremony, they would be willing to pay any price for assisting at this ceremony. However, White Lotus wouldn't let any noble come and hold her hands in the sacrificial ceremony. Only her sister and the prince could hold her hands. Open the door of dusk. After asking the 3 questions, the most critical moment was coming. In the evening twilight, the door connected the mortal world and the god's world was slowly opening. A golden light shone through the half-open door, shining on the twin witches and Yunshi's bodies. At the end of the western desert, above the earth where the pyramids stood, the Lord of the Sky, the incarnation of order and truth, the infinite light, the sun god, Hira Azda's figure was visible through the door. It was a god with a golden scepter in his hand and a dog-headed mask on his face. Just looking at his figure, Yunshi felt as if he was staring at a shining and brilliant sun. Sun god. Hira Azda. Reading the god's real name out, White Lotus blushed and was a little excited. Although she was known as a genius who had mastered the great circulation, she never thought that she could successfully summon the legendary sun god one day. This was an ancient god who had participated in the twilight of the gods and survived. He was the incarnation of the sun, walking on the earth in the form of the Sunwalker. Among all gods in the endless gods' domains, he was one of the strongest gods, the sun god of the Persian gods' domain. The strongest god, the Sunwalker. Red Lotus was not good at holding the ceremony, however, she also knew what the sun god stood for. In any myth or legend, the sun symbolized the origin of life and was worshipped and praised by countless people. As long as it was a place where intelligent beings lived, there was the legend of sun gods. However, there were only a few gods in the endless gods' domains who were really a veritable sun god. To be the god of the sun, they needed to have the ability to transform into a real sun. Accurately speaking, all sun gods were also sunwalkers, the real legends walking amongst the infinite stars. Hira Azda was the strongest and the most famous one amongst all sunwalkers. The cost of summoning such a god was unthinkable. Did my sister just accomplish an extraordinary feat? What's that golden red cryolite? Is it really so special? Witches, I am very satisfied with your sacrifices. Prepare to receive the blessings of the sun god. The sun god's voice was tremendous. Even though he had not yet stepped across the door of dusk, his god power had begun to shine in the room. He's really a kind god. Yunshi also saw the sun god's figure through the door, however, compared to the dazzling golden scepter in his hand and the mysterious dog-headed mask on his face. he paid more attention to the bracelet on the god's wrist. Incredibly, when Yunshi saw the golden bracelet on Hira's wrist, he had a strange feeling as if he had seen the same bracelet somewhere in the past. From the golden lines on the bracelet, he felt as if he was looking at the record of the memory of the stars. The door opened. Hira Azda held the golden scepter in his hand and was going to step directly into the door from the void. No, I came first. I was the first. I found it earlier than you. I will never let you obtain it. After a sharp, high-pitched sound, endless wings surrounded the sun god, who was about to enter the door of dusk, and finally formed a pair of crimson wings. Phoenix was back. Impossible. Have you not been annihilated? Hira Azda looked at the crimson wings in astonishment. The next moment, Phoenix's wings forcibly pulled up the sun god's body, flying madly into the sky. This wasn't a common attack, but a suicide attack. Phoenix didn't snatch the golden red gem in Hira's hand, but carried the sun god's body, crashing into the dome of the battlefield. You're crazy. Aware of what Phoenix was going to do, Hira Azda's voice became flustered and shrill. He brandished the golden scepter in his hand and summoned a million sand soldiers again. He was going to use the sun disk again. Unfortunately, Phoenix had learned a lesson before and would never give him another chance. Boom! With a sound, Phoenix's wings carried Hira Azda's body and the golden red gem, brutally crashing into the dome of the battlefield. The sky was broken. A big hole appeared on the dome of the closed battlefield. The aura of the sacrifice, which was enclosed in the battlefield created by Hira Azda's god power before, now was totally exposed in the void. In the next second, more than 10 legend-ranked wills had locked on this area from all directions. Chapter 509 Angry Sun God 1 Closure. Hira Azda, the desperate sun god, waved the golden scepter in his hand and repaired the big hole smashed through by Phoenix. The guardian of the gate, Lilibut Elizabeth, had also moved. Her azure god sword drew a mysterious arc in the air. An ice-blue halo spread out in a circle, directly expanding the area of the battlefield created by Hira's god power to 10 times. But this time, it wasn't just a battle between Phoenix and Hira Azda. A total of 10 supernatural, godlike beings were attracted by the sacrifice, descending into this area in different ways. 7 of them were in human forms, but they all hid their true faces using different methods. Nobody knew whether they were real gods under their human figures. Their human appearances should just be their projections. Occasionally, some terrible beings would also pretend to be a god in human form, deceiving the witches in the sacrificial ceremony. In addition to the 7 people, there were 2 projections of fantastic creatures. They were from the highest god's domain and the eastern god's domain, the Kunlun god's domain. They were frequent callers of witches' sacrificial ceremonies. One of them had red feathers, broad beak, standing on 1 foot. Its name was Bifong, a godbird of fire. The other one was a dragon with golden scales and wings, looking around with an arrogant expression. Its name was Inglong. Just like Bifong, it was also a subordinate of the master of the Kunlun god's domain, the West Queen. Both of them were fire-type fantastic creatures. Like the 7 human-shaped projections, they arrived at this area immediately after feeling the aura of the sacrifice. Behind the 2 fantastic creatures, there was a strange egg that was floating in the void. Bifong and Inglong were looking at the egg nervously. Their eyes are very confused, as if something totally unexpected had happened. At this moment, there were 12 god-ranked beings gathered around the door of dusk for a sacrifice. Such a thing had never happened before in the history of the sacrificial ceremony. Good. Very good. Phoenix, are you satisfied? Hira Azda looked around and ground his teeth. Just 1 step later, he would have the sacrifice. However, Phoenix totally ruined his plan and brought 10 new opponents to the battlefield. Essentially, the sacrificial ceremony was a contract. As long as the last step of the sacrificial ceremony had not been completed yet, even though he had held the sacrifice in his hand, the sacrifice still didn't belong to him. In history, there were indeed witches who were eaten by the fake gods they summoned. In this case, the fake gods would lose their sacrifices. Of course, The sacrifices weren't the fake gods' goals from the very beginning. They responded to Witch's call just because they wanted to spread horror and chaos. Most of the time, the extraordinary existences who descended onto the altar were still satisfied with the sacrifices. The appearances of evil gods were just rare exceptions. In very few cases, there would be two gods who were interested in the same sacrifice and responded to the same sacrificial ceremony. At this time, there was basically only one way to decide who could go through the door of dusk, compare each other's god power. To put it more plainly, the two gods would have a fight and the winner could go through the door, just like what Phoenix and Hura Azda did before. However, the sacrifice this time was too special. Both of them didn't want to give it up. Phoenix came first, but she wasn't very familiar with the sacrificial ceremony. When she hesitated, Hura Azda had come and robbed the sacrifice. Just in case, Hura Azda had also sealed this area in the void using his god power. At the same time, he also called the guardian of the Sky Sword God's domain to be the witness. Hura Azda's behavior didn't deviate from the order of the Sky Sword God's domain. So therefore, Lillibut, the guardian of the Sky Sword God's domain, witnessed the duel between Phoenix and Hura and confirmed his victory. Originally, the sun god should step across the door of dusk and complete the ceremony, giving the twin witches and Yun Shia's blessings. After that, he could take away the sacrifice. The problem was that Phoenix was not going to give up. Even though she had been burned to ashes by Hura Azda's sun disk, she still strove to revive and fly back, shouting at the sun god, "It's mine. I saw it first. I got here first. Even if I can't get it, I won't let you take it away. Phoenix, the immortal bird. In my dictionary, there is never the word death. For human gods, 3 monsters, and 3 fantastic creatures. There is even an egg." Looking at the 10 enemies who were staring at the golden red gem in his hand, Hura Azda gritted his teeth and thrust his golden scepter into the golden sand. "It seems that I will have to beat down 10 opponents today." The sun disk rotated and became bigger and bigger in his hand. In the Song of Millions of Sand Soldiers, Hura Azda, the Sunwalker, one of the oldest ancient gods, showed his real power. Chapter 5:10. Angry Sun God 2. The golden scepter represented the supreme divine power of the sun, and was also the symbol of Hura Azda in the Persian god's domain. With this golden scepter in his hand, Hura Azda could summon his millions of sand soldiers anywhere, driving this indestructible army to defeat all enemies who dared to violate his sanctity. As time went by, people only remembered his sand soldier army and gradually forgot how dangerous Hura Azda himself was. He was a god, but in fact, he didn't need any believers to enhance his strength. He existed and became immortal long before he became the supreme god of the Persian god's domain. Even in the endless god's domains, he was very rare and special because he was a sunwalker. Even amongst all legend ranked classes, Sunwalker was one of the most dangerous. In legend, Sunwalkers couldn't come to the mortal world, because as long as Sunwalkers opened their eyes, their bodies would emit endless light and heat. In the sight of a Sunwalker, everything would be ignited and burned to ashes. Hura looked around. The earth became a sea of lava. Countless fire spirits cheered and flew up, sang and danced around him. "Let there be light," Hura uttered, and there was light. The sky and the earth are filled with light, dispelling all darkness. Countless sword-like golden lights tore all evil existences to pieces and swept them away. In the light, darkness still existed, but it wasn't the power of night, but sunspots, which stood for the ultimate power of light and heat. At the same time, there were also countless red dots erupting, which was the phenomenon called solar flare. This was the sun, and all sunwalkers would experience the same thing when they were born. They were the people who embraced the sun, and even themselves would be transformed into a sun, shining on all things in the world. In front of the power of the sun, everything would be annihilated, leaving no wisdom, but fire spirits accompanied by the lonely sunwalker. In fact, it was impossible for human beings to become a sunwalker. It wasn't a realm that could be achieved by hard practice. All sunwalkers were born with the ability to transform into a sun. In star magic of the endless gods' domains, magic related to the sun was a taboo. Even the class, Sunwalker itself, was also a taboo. In the Western gods' domain, in order to learn the forbidden magic Last Judgment, mages would be willing to pay the price with their lives. However, Last Judgment was just a natural phenomenon for the real Sunwalkers. Their bodies were surrounded by Last Judgment every minute and every second. In the end, all the Sunwalkers would have left the ground lonely, flew to the world of the stars, and even became a real sun in the sky. People would also devote their faith to these Sunwalkers, although they had no interest in being a so-called sun god. Hura Azda was such a Sunwalker. Unlike the gods in the Western gods' domain, who became a god by faith, he didn't need any believers. He became a sun god because he chose to sleep and became a son of a remote god's domain. When he woke up, he found that he had become the sun god of that god's domain. It was a problem for all Sunwalkers. If they slept too long, they would really become a sun. Putting down the golden scepter in his hand, only Hura Azda himself knew what it meant. It meant that he had given up his identity as a sun god. He would start a war using his true power. The power of a Sunwalker. Feel fear in the face of a Sunwalker. Holding the sun disk in his hand, Hura Azda's eyes became very dangerous. The appearance of a Sunwalker in the mortal world was equal to declaring the end of the world. Therefore, most Sunwalkers would stay away from the mortal worlds. Because of this, too few people could meet a Sunwalker, and lesser people would understand how powerful and dangerous a Sunwalker was. When Hura raised the sun disk, all gods and fantastic creatures felt a strong aura from it. It looked like a common golden wheel, but when the black particles around it started to explode, everyone's heartbeat accelerated. They all suddenly had an ominous presentiment that the end was coming. Of course, there was an exception. "I'm not afraid of you," Phoenix shouted with no fear. She was Phoenix, the immortal bird. Even if a real sun exploded, she would still live well in the fire of the sun. Why did she need to be worried? Solar flares. Hura Azda glanced at Phoenix. He was convinced that he had killed her just now, but she was still alive now. It seemed that Phoenix's immortality power was more exaggerated than the rumors he heard. "It doesn't matter. If I can't kill her, I will let her taste the pain of being killed. She would learn from it and give up." Initially, it was just a red spot, an astronomical phenomenon developed from a cluster of countless sunspots. However, this astronomical phenomenon didn't occur on the surface of a sun, but on the battlefield created by Hura Azda. In the next second, the solar flare's brightness had exceeded the limit of human eyes. If an ordinary person was here, even if he closed his eyes, his retinas would still be burned and blinded. If an astronomical phenomenon appeared at a place it shouldn't exist, what would happen? The answer was simple: the end of the world. Numerous golden red flames covered the sky and the earth and were still diffusing infinitely. It was a real solar flare, an astronomical explosion. The angry Sunwalker, Hura Azda, finally revealed his real, horrible power after being provoked. No one could escape from the diffused blazing light wave, which was an all-around attack that had covered the entire world. The so-called forbidden magic of human beings was a joke compared to the solar flare. Real astronomical phenomenon. In the light wave, countless fire and light spirits began to fly. They were parts of the sun. They were the manifestation of the rules of the universe. These beautiful, young spirits happily opened their little wings, danced, and eulogized the sun. They were the only inhabitants who kept company with the lonely Sunwalker, but they didn't have wisdom. They only knew to move along the sun, appearing in the solar flares and sunspots that could lead to the end of the world. The crust of the battlefield vaporized in an instant, like butter in a great fire. The endless solar particle storms covered and devoured the entire battlefield of gods, and this was only the beginning. Thousands of mushroom clouds rose into the sky. Countless hot magma and flames shot into the sky and then were evaporated. The solar flare had just started erupting, and the whole battlefield of gods had reached the end stage. "Leave. It's my sacrifice." Hura Azda showed his last mercy as a god, launching an ultimatum to the other 10 gods on the battlefield. Once the solar flare really broke out, it would trigger a battle that could totally eliminate the entire White Lotus Sword domain. Haha, ancient sun god, aren't you too confident? One of the 7 human gods slowly extended his hand, and the hand gradually became distorted black and proliferated sucker-like organs on it. A fake god. Hura Azda despised looking at the fake god who dared to offend him. These fake gods weren't friendly. Compared to the sacrifice, they preferred to eat the witches who were holding the sacrificial ceremony. However, they were like a joke in the eyes of a sunwalker. Hura himself had barbecued more than one squid who disguised as a god. The so-called fake god was just a larger polypod extraordinary creature. Only very few fake gods were strong enough to face a sunwalker's sunfire. Most fake gods had tentacles and loved eating people. In Hura's eyes, the only value they had was to become a squid string baked by himself. According to his experience, the squid string made by fake god's body tasted good. Before becoming the god of the Persian god's domain, Hura Azda had played the role as a star squid hunter for a long time. To a lonely sunwalker, it was a luxury to eat something decent, and fake god squid string was a classic cuisine to sunwalkers. Goo, Hura Azda swallowed. He recalled the time when he hunted and roasted squid before he became the sun god. The temperature on the battlefield was still rising, from hundreds to thousands of degrees, soon reaching a value that no normal living creature could survive. However, none of the gods on the battlefield was a normal living creature. Therefore, they could still withstand the temperature. His god power isn't easy to deal with. Why is it this guy? Inglong shrank its huge body and carefully protected the egg, looking at Hura Azda with knitted brows. Hura Azda, the god of the Persian god's domain. Compared with his identity, his god power is more troublesome. Bifong stood on the shivering egg. It just felt curious and came to see what the sacrifice was, but now, it realized that it was involved in big trouble. That egg. It was the West Queen's unborn daughter. Why did it come with Inglong? If the West Queen's little daughter was injured here, all people here would be killed by the angry West Queen. Almost all the fantastic creatures knew that the West Queen loved her unborn daughter very much. She had prepared to pass the crown to this little princess, even though it was still an unhatched egg. If something happened to the egg, she and Inglong didn't even dare to imagine what would happen. If she knew that the egg would also come, she and Inglong would never dare to leave the Kunlun god's domain, trying to scramble for the sacrifice. Unlike other human gods and fake gods, she and Inglong clearly knew how terrible and powerful an angry sunwalker could be. Tens of thousands of degrees of heat was just a beginning for a sunwalker. Compared to sunwalkers, evil and fake gods were nothing. Why did people regard the sunwalker as the sun god? Because they felt frightened. If an evil god descended into a mortal world, there was still a chance to drive it away. However, if it was a sunwalker who descended into the mortal world, the world would immediately be ignited. There would never be any chance for any hero to save the world. Let's go, we shouldn't be here. Finding that the sacrifice was in the sunwalker's hand, Bifong and Inglong made the same choice. Not all legend-ranked beings had an immortal body like Phoenix. Bifong and Inglong clearly knew that a sunwalker was too strong to be their opponent. Bang! Just as Inglong and Bifong were ready to leave, from the egg that was well protected by them, a strange and powerful heartbeat suddenly came. How could it be? The princess hasn't formed a body yet. Bifong and Inglong shouted at the same time. Inglong's body tightly wrapped around the egg, and Bifong's wings raised high, using its strongest skill to protect the egg. Bang! Bang! No mistake. In the egg they protected, the smallest daughter of the West Queen. The unborn princess's heart was pounding heavily. At the same time, opposite the door of dusk, Yunshi's heart also suddenly began to beat faster, as if there was a voice calling him in the blurred world opposite the door. Bang! Bang! His strong heartbeat quickly attracted White Lotus's attention. She looked at the world behind the door, which was covered by endless light and fire, and lost in thought. My prince, have you summoned 2 real sons? Which of the 2 sons will you choose? Hira Azda also sensed it. There was a familiar odor coming from the direction of the two fantastic creatures. He vaguely recalled that these two fantastic creatures were the descendants of the West Queen. They were strong fire-type fantastic creatures. Of course, they were no match for him. Why are they protecting the egg carefully? Why did I feel a familiar odor from the egg? Is it another fire-type fantastic creature? Yinglong was a fire-type dragon and the totem of emperors. Bifong was also a fire-type fantastic creature, but it was slightly weaker than Yinglong. Phoenix was an exception. It was also a fire-type fantastic creature, but it wouldn't die in any situation. Even though Hira Azda was a sunwalker, he felt a headache when facing Phoenix. So, what is the fantastic creature in that egg? At this time, the fake gods finally found something wrong. They come from a world called Abyss, which was located in the dark side of the infinite gods' domains, in the gap connected with endless nightmare worlds. These fake gods, or squid string in Hira's eyes, liked to pretend to be a god. Deceive witches and eat them in the sacrificial ceremony was one of their favorite games. It was their happiest entertainment to see helpless witches turn into their food. To this end, they specially learned various tricks and deceptions and studied the loopholes in the sacrificial ceremony. For them, deceiving a witch and eating her had almost become a ritual, a proof of being recognized by the abyss. No, impossible. Why can't we leave? My body is burning. They were confused and frightened because they just came to this place in the form of projections. Even if their projections were burnt to ashes, they wouldn't feel any pain. Why can't they leave? After all these years, you squids still cheat people in the same old way. You can pretend to be gods to deceive ignorant little girls. How dare you to think that this will also work in front of me? Hira Azda looked at the struggling fake gods with a happy smile. Catching squid was once one of my duties. The coordinates of your true bodies have already been exposed. The golden sun disk spun and flew out, dragging out several big squids, who liked the mixture of cuttlefish, king squash, and pig squid from the endless abyss. They thought that they didn't need to worry about anything, because they just came using their projections. However, as a star squid hunter who had caught hundreds of squids, Hira Azda had rich experience in finding their true bodies by tracing their projections. Without the protection of the abyss, these squids' combat power was barely worth mentioning. They could only pretend to be fake gods in front of common hero-ranked witches. If they met a legend-ranked witch, their only fate was to be caught and become dried squids. This power, terrible, sun god. Hira Azda, looking at the several fake gods' true bodies being dragged out of the abyss, the remaining human gods finally understood what a strong opponent they were facing. Soon, realizing that they would be killed by the solar flare if they still stayed here, they made the right choice, gave up the sacrifice and ran away without hesitation. No matter how good the sacrifice was, only the living one could enjoy it. They weren't Phoenix, who wouldn't die no matter what happened. It was impossible for their projections to withstand the sun god's flames of fury. In the blink of an eye, only Phoenix, Yinglong, Bifong, the egg, and the 3 squids who had been toasted remained. Now, does any of you still want to stop me? Looking at Phoenix, who was blown into pieces again, Hira Azda decided to complete the contract quickly and actually obtain the special gem in his hand. I want it. A somewhat hazy voice sounded on the battlefield, which made the 2 fantastic creatures astonished. It's my thing, little guy. I came first. Hira Azda quickened his pace and wanted to complete the contract as quickly as possible in case that Phoenix revived again. As the supreme god of the Persian god's domain, he faced too many frustrations today. He felt as if there was an evil spirit in the darkness that was trying to stop him from grabbing this special golden red gem. No, I came first. I was here first. You're the robber who robbed my gem halfway. Out of Hira's expectation, Phoenix had revived and flew back. So, am I the third? The callow voice echoed on the battlefield of gods, and soon came to its own conclusion. No matter who came first, only the person who gets it is the number one. Haha, that's a cunning speech, but it's true. Hura nodded his head and endorsed the egg's words. Indeed, there is no such a rule in the world that the person who saw the treasure first could be the treasure's owner. No matter where we are, only the strongest person can have the best treasure. If you want it, you should come and steal it yourself. If you don't steal it, then someone else will rob you. No matter how much you like it, once you are robbed, it will never be yours. If you want something you like, try to be stronger, new little son. Hura Azda realized the true identity of the egg. He reached out his hand and millions of fiery red spears appeared in the air in an instant, locking on the fantastic creatures. Millions of flame spears blew up like a trumpet, declaring the end of the world. The solar flare finally evolved to the last stage. If the human gods still stayed on this battlefield, none of them would survive under this attack. Even Inglong and Bifong, the two fire-type fantastic creatures, were unable to fend for themselves in this situation. Only Phoenix was still struggling. After all, she wouldn't die. Even if you said so, I want it, because I am the sun. On the altar of deity, Yunshi's body was instantly covered by a golden red light and suddenly disappeared. The next second, he saw endless golden red flame spears in front of him. Countless strange golden red fire clouds boiled and rotated around him. Countless light and fire spirits cheered and danced around him. In his body, an unimaginable power was controlling him, declaring its own voice to the world. I am the sun. I am the sun. Yunshi duplicated this sentence foolishly and thought that he must be dreaming. However, the horrible power that kept pouring into his body let him know that it wasn't a dream, but a miracle that was happening. This power is... Yunshi remembered it. On the Starry Sky chessboard, in the game with Orfina, he once summoned the projection of this unknown fantastic creature. However, it was just a game. In the real world, it should be impossible to encounter such a strong, fantastic creature. Its beautiful wings showed a miraculous golden red color. The two colors reflected each other as if they were light and fire spirits. Even in the destructive solar flare, the glory of its wings was unique. I am the sun. Again, the youngest daughter of the West Queen declared to Hura Azda, the Sunwalker. How is this possible? You are not even born yet. How can you appear? For the first time, Hura Azda couldn't hide the shock in his heart. None of the Sunwalkers could utter that sentence before they were awakened. I am the sun. This was what all Sunwalkers would say after they realized the essence of their bodies. For all Sunwalkers, it was the last thing they wanted to remember, but they had to engrave it deep in their memory. After saying it, they would forever embark on a lonely road that no one would understand. It had nothing to do with genius, race, origin, or gender. The reason why a Sunwalker could become a Sunwalker was all because of this sentence. I am the sun. Chapter 513. The Duel Between Two Suns. 1. I support you. Phoenix flew happily to Yunshi and danced around him with countless flame spirits. She didn't know the reason, but in her heart, she naturally felt an intimate aura from him. Just flying around him, she was intoxicated in a compulsive joy. On the contrary, she couldn't conceal her aversion to the sun god who robbed the precious gem from her own hands. Unforgivable. Thank you, but I won't let you obtain the gem either. The unknown egg, the fantastic creature who was possessing Yunshi's body, now declared. Oh, you found it too. Hura Azda took a deep breath. At first glance, this golden red gem itself wasn't something too precious. It looked just like a variant of a common cryolite. Why could it draw so many extraordinary creatures' attention? Because there was a special aura contained in the golden red gem. It was hard to describe the temptation of the aura to fire-type creatures. Any gods who sensed the aura wouldn't remain indifferent. Cryolite was a rare treasure even amongst gods, plus the special aura inside it. Its value was 100 times higher than any common cryolites. Especially for fire-type, light-type, and sun-type gods, its value was even higher. Only the strongest gods could understand how rare and precious it was. Hira even wondered if it was the polymerized substance from a galaxy explosion. Otherwise, it couldn't explain the joy when he held the gem in his hand. How long haven't I felt this joy? After becoming a sunwalker, he had almost forgotten all emotions as an ordinary person. He was a sun shining on all things, but he could only wander alone forever. Only when he hunted and barbecued the squid strings could he feel a little warmth. The universe was too unfriendly to sunwalkers. Therefore, he must obtain this gem, which could let him feel warm again. None of you can stop me, even if you are the same sun as me. He had been lonely for too long. He didn't want to give up the warmth in his hand. No, no one can steal it from me. Loneliness made him understand how precious this thing was that could let him feel warm again. For this reason, he didn't mind beating down another sun. Little sun, you shouldn't be here. Holding the sun disk with both hands, the temperature around Hira's body began to rise rapidly. 100,000 Celsius degrees, 200,000 Celsius degrees, 300,000 Celsius degrees. A huge amount of air was ionized and projected out, forming a fierce solar storm. Materials around Hira could no longer exist in normal forms. The decomposed particles formed high-temperature plasmas and constantly emitted pop and crack sounds. In contrast, a large number of black particles started to gather around the golden red bird. Sunspots began to emerge and formed countless shields in front of her. Obviously, there was a huge gap between the two sides in the use of their own solar power. Hira's control and adjustment ability to his solar power was far superior to the unknown golden red birds. Of course, the adjustment abilities was based on the unit of 10,000 degrees. For the sun, 10,000 degrees was the basic unit. In the human world, this temperature could melt steel instantaneously. No, if this goes on, I will be killed again. Phoenix waved her wings and flew restlessly around Yunshi, seemingly trying to protect the immature golden red bird with her own body and wings. Of course, it was no use. Once Hira, the Sunwalker, got serious, she couldn't find any way to stop him. On the battlefield, only a sun could fight against another sun. The first Essen drive opens. On the sun disk in Hira's hand, a golden mark began to shine, releasing infinite power. Huge solar flares began to shrink. The temperature around Hira rose to more than 1,000,000 Celsius degrees in one breath. Boiling golden red plasma bubbles continued to emerge and burst around him. The entire battlefield began to falter because of the horrible high temperature. The entire battlefield had entered its countdown phase. This time, it wasn't because of Phoenix, but Hira who was going to destroy the battlefield using his solar power. The sun disk, the Essen drive, the light furnace, the emergence of the power of the sun. It was the inexhaustible source of power in countless people's imaginations. It was a thing that couldn't be created scientifically or theoretically. Just like CyberElf Alpha's infinite computing power, the Essen drive was the core of a sun, a real existence, a so-called perpetual motion machine. It was the unique ability of the Sunwalkers. Owning the Essen drive meant that the Sunwalker could transfer himself into a real sun. Releasing the power of the Essen drive meant that Hira had become serious. He had taken a real action to defeat the newborn golden red bird. The number of Essen drives could also be regarded as one of the criteria for the strength of a Sunwalker. As the supreme god of the Persian god's domain, an ancient god who survived in the twilight of the gods, at the peak of his powers, he could summon 12 Essen drives at the same time. Chapter 514. The duel between two suns, every Essen drive, was equal to a real sun. Investigating its source, it seemed to go back to a very distant era. In the time before the endless gods' domains was established, when the gods just set foot in other worlds. Before the twilight of the gods, there were once 12 Essen drives in Hira's sun disk. As the cost of surviving from the twilight of the gods, he lost half of his Essen drives. Ordinary legend-ranked beings weren't qualified to let Hira, the sun god, liberated the Essen drives in the sun disk. In other words, the golden red bird had had the power to make Hira become serious. He had recognized its power. Hira's true body didn't descend into this world. His body here was formed by the strength of faith from the millions of sand soldiers. Therefore, the power he showed now was already his limit. On the contrary, although the golden red bird came with its true body, her true body was still an egg with zero attack power. Therefore, she used another method to awaken its future appearance in advance. She possessed Yunshi's body. With Yunshi's body as a medium, the golden red bird opened its wings and gave its first chirp to the ancient sun god. In the chirp, the golden red bird waved its wings, flying faster and higher. She was born to be above everything, even if her opponent was an ancient god. She didn't mind the throne of the sun god, because she was born to fly above the 33 heavens, shining on all things. Amongst all fantastic creatures, she was the strongest one, who had a strong self-confidence even before she was born. The spirits of light and fire sang together, offering their joy to the newborn sun. The old sun, the new sun. At the moment the two suns met, they would inevitably burst out earth-shaking sparks. Ah, whatever, I don't care. Phoenix chased after the golden red bird and rushed up to the top of the sky. On the ground, Hura was absorbed in controlling the sun disk in his hands. For sunwalkers, the worry was never about energy shortage, but about restraining their impulse to destroy everything. If he released all the energy contained in the SN drive, not only the battlefield would be destroyed, even the White Lotus Sword domain below would also be totally destroyed. The witches who summoned him were still waiting for his arrival in the sword domain. I must thoroughly solve this minor problem quickly. Yes, in the eyes of the sun god, Hura Azda, the golden red bird was still no match for him. Even though he had lost half of the SN drives he was still the strongest sun god in the Persian god's domain. With his rich experience, 6 SN drives were enough for him to defeat dozens of gods at once. If he still had 12 SN drives now, he could even temporarily reach level 9, the highest level of a legend-ranked god could reach. In Hura's eyes, the golden red bird did have the qualification to sit on the same level with himself in the future, but that would be 10,000 of years later, when she had obtained at least 10 SN drives. At this moment, the golden red bird didn't even have a SN drive. How could it be matched for him? Countless high-temperature plasma bubbles spread behind Hura. The world seemed to be cooked. Rivers evaporated. Seas dried up, and mountains burned up. This was the inevitable consequences of a sunwalker's arrival on the Earth, as well as the prelude to the extinction of a world. I want to fly. Fly to higher places. Follow me. Together, to the sky above the 33 heavens, a crisp, firm, tender voice echoed inside Yunshi's mind. Even after seeing the power of Hura's SN drive, she was still fearless and courageous. Whoever my opponent is, I won't lose. I want to surpass my opponents and become the strongest. So, trust me. Lend me your strength. My strength? Yunshi was confused. There was no room for him in this level of battle. What could a hero-ranked baker do in the battle between two suns? Make bread on the spot to supplement physical strength for her? This time, his body wasn't being possessed by Cassina's will attachment, nor Lilibet was protecting him with her power. He really didn't know what to do at this moment. I believe in you. You have such power and such a future. You can also trust me that I can help you obtain the future you will have in advance. So I summoned you. My power. A drop of sweat fell down from Yunshi's forehead. Has she found that I'm the Star Child? However, although he knew that he was a Star Child, he didn't know how a Star Child should fight. Nor did Mayer know. It seemed that his fighting force in his past life wasn't very strong, otherwise, he wouldn't be tragically killed by his 4 ex-girlfriends. Not you now, but you in the future. What you want, what you imagine, what you can become. The strongest you. The you on the starry sky chessboard. Her tender voice affirmed Yunshi's future. At that time, she felt the unusual aura, so she opened her eyes inside the egg and descended onto the starry sky chessboard. What awakened her was the opportunity Yunshi had. She didn't know the reason, because the true Yunshi didn't have any legend-ranked power, but she wouldn't mistake the aura, and because of the aura, she came and joined the battle. She didn't want to give that gem to anyone else. So it was you. You were summoned by me, Yunshi finally understood why the golden red bird came here. Chapter 5:15. The Duel Between Two Suns, 3. Which came first? The chicken or the egg? I was summoned to the battlefield by this unknown golden red bird, and this golden red bird was summoned by me. Yunshi felt regret. Why did he play so recklessly on the starry sky chessboard? Why did he summon it into the game? However, there was no medicine for regret in the world. It was impossible for him to leave now. What would he become if they were defeated? Looking at the plasma bubbles under his feet, he didn't dare to imagine it. Even if it was a hero-ranked being who fell into the plasma bubbles, he or she would be instantly evaporated, not to mention ordinary people. This was the power of the sun god. So, what can I do now? I can only imagine. He didn't know how he fought in his previous life. He could only imagine what the legend-ranked power should be. When was his closest moment to the legend-ranked power? Undoubtedly, it was when he was on the starry sky chessboard, playing with Cyber Elf Alpha. Cyber Elf Alpha was the only legend-ranked being he had ever defeated, although he just defeated her in a game. The power the golden red bird wanted was not the he in the real world, but the he on the starry sky chessboard. In the real world, Yunshi was just a hero-ranked baker, which was not even qualified to be cannon fodder here. On the starry sky chessboard, he was the master of Stargo. He was the invincible legend. Only on the starry sky chessboard, he had the power to defeat a legend-ranked being. I am a legend. Being pushed to the limit, Yunshi could only exert his infinite imagination and hint at himself. You are a legend. In response to Yunshi's voice, the young golden red bird began to increase its strength and merge with Yunshi, just as she fought side by side with him on the starry sky chessboard. I am the light. Yunshi closes his eyes, recalling the glorious moments on the starry sky chessboard. I am the light. Behind the golden red bird, numerous golden feathers floated down, giving off a bursts of blazing sunshine. What's going on? Hura watched in astonishment as the golden red bird flew higher and higher into the sky. Not right, it's not right. It's just a newborn fantastic creature. How could her power rise at such an incredible rate? She is just a baby bird who hadn't obtained her own drive yet. How could she understand and even master the power of the real sun? I am a myth. Yunshi's eyes gradually become dim. I am a myth. The golden red bird continued to weave the fantasy belonging to Yunshi and her. Impossible. Impossible. The secret of the sun is a rule that needs to be learned for thousands of years. How can you master it now? What is it? What is helping her? Hura couldn't believe his eyes. In his eyes, the golden red baby bird was growing at a miraculous rate, like a baby who suddenly become a pretty young girl overnight. I am the sun. Recalling the battles on the starry sky chessboard, Yunshi suddenly opened his eyes and declared the truth that only sunwalkers could say. I am the sun. The golden red bird repeated the sentence cheerfully. Yes, this was what she was expecting and waiting for. For this, she crossed countless worlds and came here to meet him. Endless golden red flames burst out with glowing lights and surrounded Yunshi's body. The golden red bird disappeared. Instead, a figure with golden red wings appeared. Brand new SN drives were placed on both sides of the wings of this figure, emitting the aura of the eternal blazing sun. At that instant, the same words echoed in their ears. Everything rises to welcome you. Praise you, the only light. You will rise to the top of the world sky. You rise, you shine. You take away the darkness upon the earth. You are the king of all gods and the lord of all things. Everything comes because of you. Everything becomes sacred because of you. From your wings, the sky and the sea are interlaced. The holy temple is glorified by your name, and you will become a legend in legends. We come from you and are holy because of you. You will wear your holy crown on the clouds and take the throne. You are the source of all life, and you have crossed the river of time. Praise you, my Lord, for your life will wake up from your slumber, and you will be immortal for thousands of years, now and forever. It was an ode to the sun, to the Sunwalkers. It was the worship of all living beings who believe in the sun. You created a SN drive by yourself. Listening to this familiar ode, Hura realized that the newborn golden red bird had become a new Sunwalker, just like himself. It's not understandable. It's totally unreasonable. The creation of a SN drive was an enormous project. No matter how talented a Sunwalker was, it was impossible to become one within such a short time. Moreover, it didn't just create one, it just created two. Two SN drives. Did he just witness the birth of the most talented Sunwalker in the universe just now? Opening his eyes, she could clearly feel the endless power of fire in his body and the pair of SN drives on his shoulders. He felt like he was dreaming. Why can I succeed in such a simple way? He just imagined the power of the sun, but he really knew nothing about the nature of the sun. He simply imagined what he would look like if he could transform into a sun. It seemed that there was some force in the dark that helped him weave the rules of the sun, and even told him the ranks of the golden red bird and Hura the sun god. Sunwalker was one of the most powerful careers in the endless gods' domains. Now, he was also a Sunwalker. Undoubtedly, he had zero knowledge about the sun, which wouldn't be taught in the Sword Palace. However, he naturally understood the inside structure of the SN drive. If it wasn't because the golden red bird's power could only create two SN drives at this moment, he felt that he could make more SN drives. Thank you, great stars. Apparently, the great stars helped him again. After that, Yunshi started to make the god weapon that Sunwalkers could use. For Sunwalkers, they didn't need any material, because they themselves were the best materials. Hura Azda's sun disk was made in this way, and the god weapon Yunshi was going to make would also be made in this way. Tell me your name. While driving the two SN drives to make the god weapon, Yunshi asked for the unknown fantastic creature's name. I have no name yet. This question really baffled the mysterious fantastic creature. Of course, she had no name, because her true body was still an egg. She wasn't born yet. If Yunshi hadn't summoned her onto the starry sky chessboard, she would have been born after thousands of years. Now she was in a fantastic state, existing in theory, but not really existing, like a cat in a box. Before anyone observed it, no one would know if it was alive or dead, and Yunshi was the one who found her and observed her. Well, I'll give you a name. You have beautiful golden wings, and you are a sun. Then, I will call you Golden Sun Crow. Yunshi casually gave it a name. At the same time, an exquisite god weapon was shaping in his hands. Although he could use it one time on the battlefield, Yunshi still played all his imagination into it, casting it into the most gorgeous posture. Golden Sun Crow. This name very good. So, my name will be Golden Sun Crow, the sun above the 33 heavens. The mysterious fantastic creature was very satisfied with this name. Well, then we have to win, Yunshi said, and had no other choice. If he won, he could survive. If he lost, he would be burned to ashes. Well, it's better to win. Sorry, Sun God. We summoned you, but now I have to drive you away. The god weapon of the Sunwalker was forged. It was a golden red bow with a black bowstring. If one looked at it carefully, one would find that the black on the bowstring was formed by numerous black particles. Unlike Hura's sun disk, Yunshi's god weapon was purely a temporary one-off weapon made for this battle. Because he refined it from Golden Sun Crow's power, he named it Destroyer of the Sun Crow. After the bow was formed, Yunshi shot an arrow at Hura without hesitation. A gentle vibration dispersed at Yunshi's fingertips. It wasn't the vibration of sound, nor the vibration of light and flame. It was the vibration of the world's string. A golden arrow shooting out from the bow. The first shot of the Destroyer of the Golden Crow. The arrow opened its golden red wings, instantly detonating on Hura's sun disk. The next moment, a loud sound echoed through the entire battlefield. Numerous golden red flames burst out from the center of the solar flare. Billions of light and fire spirits flew together. The land under their feet completely disappeared under the impact, not even leaving a speck of dust. Its power is too exaggerated. Even Yunshi himself was frightened by the arrow's terrible power. The entire battlefield was created by Hura's god power. Even the solar flare took a long time to melt the ground. However, a single arrow from the bow had completely destroyed the battlefield. If it wasn't because Lilibet was maintaining the boundaries of the battlefield, the impact would have even affected the White Lotus sword domain below. This was the power of the sun. Once again, Yuanxi realized how unreasonable the power of the legend rank was. No wonder that people in the endless gods domains would regard legend-ranked beings as gods. The hero rank symbolized mankind's longing for extraordinary power. The legend rank was the strongest imagination of human beings for immortality and supremacy over all things. At this moment, what Yuanxi used is the power of the legend rank. It seemed that Golden Sun Crow hadn't understood how to use her power, so she gave Yuanxi all control of her power. In fact, Yuanxi himself was very guilty, because he also didn't know how to use the legend-ranked power. Well, at least, we have 2 SN drives. 2 is better than 1, isn't it? With this idea, he once again pulled open the bowstring. The string of the world trembled again. It was the cry of the world. It was the declaration of the Sunwalker's power. The second shot of the destroyer of the Golden Crow. Solar flare. Exploding. Facing the provocation launched by the new sun, Hura launched his strongest counterattack. With the sun disk rotating at a high speed in his hand, the SN drives inside it emitted an incredibly high temperature. A series of fusion phenomena appeared around Hura. The boiling sea of plasma bubbles emitted hundreds of millions of light spirits. A bolt of lightning which was not inferior to the golden arrow blasted off. As a result of the collision of the 2 god weapons, there was an unprecedentedly huge distortion in the center of the battlefield. The high temperature over 1,000,000 degrees had turned into numerous brilliant light curtains, intertwining together like a 7-colored rainbow. For a moment, neither of the combatants, Hura and Yuanxi, could see anything on the battlefield. The next second they lost their sight, they both made their choices. Hura predicted that Yuanxi would inevitably shoot a 3rd arrow. Therefore, his sun disk continued to compress and condense the power of the solar flare, ready for the next round of bombardment with the new sun. In this respect, there is no doubt that Hura had the upper hand. Even though he couldn't understand why the golden red bird could construct a pair of SN drives so quickly, he still had an advantage in terms of his control of his power. Probably, after the 12th round of the bombardment between the arrow and the lightning, Hura could launch a counterattack. After calculating the consumption of the SN drive, Hura showed a winning smile. On the other hand, Yuanxi had never thought about the consumption of the SN drives. After all, he had zero knowledge about how to use the legend-ranked power. In fact, the reason why he shot Hura was simple, because he wanted to test the power of the bow. And now, he was very satisfied with its power. When Yuanxi lost his sight, Yuanxi made a choice quickly. The bow instantly split and became a pair of golden-red double swords. Yes, from the very beginning, the bow was designed to be able to be disassembled, which was inspired by Yuanxi's weapon. An archer who doesn't understand close-quarters fighting isn't a good archer. Moreover, Yuanxi was not an archer, but a swordsman. Holding the twin swords in his hands, Yuanxi rushed to Hura, and the skill of the sky-flying sword naturally emerged in his mind. Yuanxi instinctively realized that the sky-flying sword he used now was no longer the same as in the past. It was more unrestrained and fierce. Perhaps this was the real sky-flying sword. Only the creatures who could fly freely in the sky could use this sword skill properly. Hura opened his eyes wide in astonishment. Isn't your god weapon a golden bow? Why are you holding twin swords now? Are you really an archer? Yuanxi didn't think so much. He was not an archer anyway. Like the first ray of an aurora in the sky, Yuanxi had rushed to Hura, whose sun disk was still compressing and condensing the power of the solar flare. Brandishing the twin swords, he launched the strongest attack he just mastered. Without a chance to fight back, Hura, who made a huge mistake in prediction, was torn apart, cut apart, and shattered. Numerous golden red fires exploded and spread out as if a real sun just erupted. The sun god, Hura, uttered a hysterical cry. I'll remember you. Don't think it's over. Young son of Kunlun god's domain. Boom. The entire battlefield couldn't be sustained at last. The solar flare exploded. The solar flare, which had just evolved into tens of millions of degrees of temperature, was detonated in advance, transformed into a huge light pillar and rushed into the endless void, then dispersed by an ice-blue sword. The golden red bird flew happily to the sky, celebrating its victory. The Persian god's domain was one of the few gods' domains whose gods survived the twilight of the gods. Above the god's domain, in the kingdom of God, dressed in white silk robes, devout girls knelt under the sun god statue, praying devoutly. There were 12 similar squares, and in the center of each square, there was a wheel of the sun. If one combined the 12 squares together, one would find that they formed a huge wheel of the sun. This was the sun god, Hura's kingdom of God. He didn't need the strength of faith from his believers, therefore, his statue wasn't in human form. As a sunwalker, he didn't need to show his human form to his believers, because he was the supreme god, he was the light. He was the only truth in the entire Persian god's domain. When Hura was defeated in the White Lotus Sword domain, all the praying girls heard an angry roar. Damn! Why do you have 2 drives? Young son of Kunlun god's domain. We win. Phoenix waved her wings and soared into the sky together with the golden red bird. The earth and sky were both shattered. Only Lilibet was left, picking up the mess as usual. As she brandished her ice-blue sword, the world gradually recovered from the destruction caused by the 2 sunwalkers and 3 drives. However, even the power of the guardian of the sky sword god's domain couldn't completely dispel the terrible powers of the 2 sunwalkers. The reconstructed Earth was still a world filled with magma everywhere, more than tens of millions of light and fire spirits cheering and dancing in the sky and on the ground. Have we won? Looking at his body turning into a golden red bird again, Yunshi still didn't believe his eyes. Golden Sun Crow, and he really defeated the ancient sun god. Even though it was obviously only a projection, it was undoubtedly a strong legend rank projection. If he didn't see the precious gem in the mouth of the golden red bird, he might have thought that he was dreaming. On the burning earth, the door of dusk, which once disappeared, opened again. What do you want? When Yunshi gazed at the door of dusk, Golden Sun Crow asked. Speaking of this, she remembered that she came for the sacrificial ceremony. Fortunately, the White Lotus Sword domain wasn't too far away from the Kunlun god's domain, so she could come here with her true body, and Hura had to descend into this void using a projection, which was the greatest advantage she had in this war. In the end, Hura failed to liberate the second SN drive before he was defeated. He didn't have sufficient god power to summon the second SN drive from the Persian god's domain to the battlefield. Ultimately, Yunshi was correct. 2 SN drives are stronger than 1 SN drive. What do I want? Yunshi repeated the question and was somewhat puzzled. This is a sacrificial ceremony, and you are a member in the ceremony. Moreover, you helped me defeat my greatest opponent. According to the rules of the sacrificial ceremony, I can fulfill your wish. I can give you the best sword skills, or the best seeds of bloodline. As long as you want something, I can find it and give it to you. She wasn't joking. As a princess of the Kunlun god's domain, the youngest daughter of the West Queen, as long as she asked, countless fantastic creatures would rush forward and present their most valuable treasures to her. Yunshi finally realized that the golden red bird wasn't an ordinary being. The distance between him and her was actually more distant than the countless stars. At this moment, he just used her strength to enter the realm of the legend rank, which was not his own strength. The victory of defeating the sun god made him feel highly flattered. The fact was, he wasn't Cassina the battle god nor Golden Sun Crow. His rank was still far away from the legend rank. So, what do I need? Yunshi carefully considered. He didn't lack sword skills. He had the sky-flying sword, Yunhai's quadrant sword, and the great sword maid's legacy were all great sword skills that were beyond mere mortal's imagination. The seeds of bloodline were also not too valuable to him. He had the star system, and the girls of the Starwing Knights could provide him with rich experiences of practice. Moreover, He himself was actually the star child. He didn't really need any other bloodlines. Oh, I know what I want. The crane-winged twin swords were very good, however. After witnessing the power of god weapons, he began to look forward to having a real god weapon belonging to himself. He was now only a step away from being a hero-ranked swordsman. After he reached the 4th rank, he would be able to develop his own god weapon. Sunwalker was so terrible that even if the golden red bird accidentally released its own power, it may have destroyed the world. However, there was one thing that Yunshi really wanted to have. If he could use it well, maybe it could help him to forge his own god weapon. If possible. I want, Yunshi said sheepishly. You only want that? Is that all? Golden Sun Crow didn't expect that was what Yunshi wanted. Her golden red feathers drifted down quietly, and for a while, she was at a loss. Well, that's all right. It's what I want most. Is that really all right? Thank you. That's all right. I like it very much. In their spiritual communion, Yunshi obtained the treasures he wanted, which was absolutely impossible to appear in the White Lotus Sword domain. The door of dusk opened, and the golden red bird turned into a golden flame, flying above the altar of deity. I bestow the blessing of the sun on you. Just like Hera the sun god recently, Golden Sun Crow was in an extremely good mood. She granted the twin witches her blessings and gave them gifts at the same time. Red Lotus got a golden feather. The feather merged into her Red Lotus holy sword, and the sword was thoroughly sublimated, possessing the attribute of the sun fire. White Lotus got a golden gem, which contained the power of a real sun. As for Yunshi, in addition to obtaining the golden red bird's blessing, he also got the gift he wanted, a furnace the size of a palm. This was what Yunshi wanted, a SN drive sealed. Although it was actually made by himself, it was impossible for him to use it in the real world. So he had to ask Golden Sun Crow to seal it up and turn it into a palm-sized furnace. It was probably the most precious gift he had ever obtained. So he really felt a little embarrassed when Golden Sun Crow gave it to him. I'm glad to have come here. If there is a chance, you can summon me next time. Remember, my name is Golden Sun Crow, the sun above the 33 heavens. After the deal was completed, Golden Sun Crow looked very happy. To her, it was a natural thing to give Yunshi the SN drive. After all, it didn't belong to her from the very beginning, since Yunshi helped her create it. Moreover, Yunshi only took away one of the SN drives, he also left one for her. Isn't this the so-called love token? The young Golden Sun Crow almost flew up with pleasure. If Yunshi knew what she was thinking, he would only think that she read too much into it. The SN drives were priceless treasures. Why would he take them both? The remaining SN drive, of course, belonged to Golden Sun Crow. He was the one who took the most advantage. Sister, our luck is really good. Looking at the enthusiastic Golden Sun Crow, White Lotus felt as if she was dreaming. Yeah, the gods this time are very kind. We are very lucky. Although Red Lotus didn't know why it wasn't the sun god who stepped over the door of dusk, she had a feeling that she shouldn't look into it seriously. At any rate, the golden red bird's power wasn't inferior to the sun god, and she was generous and talkative too. However, May's luck was really bad. She only obtained a very common furnace. Anyway, she was lucky enough to obtain Golden Sun Crow's blessing. When May suddenly disappeared on the altar at that time, Red Lotus thought that there was something wrong in the sacrificial ceremony and she had just been eaten by an unknown monster. Great God, you can transform into the human form and stay in this mortal world for a day. However, you can only move around the altar in the range of 10 kilometers. Do you have any plans? I can stay here for a whole day? Golden Sun Crow remembered that there was indeed such a rule in the ceremony. After the god signed the contract with the witches in the sacrificial ceremony, the god could stay in the mortal world for a day. If it was an evil god who deceived the witches and went across the door of dusk, it would become the most dangerous day. Because for 24 hours, the witches had no way to drive the evil god away. This time, there were indeed fake gods who tried to get in here. Unfortunately, they had all been found by Hera the sun god and barbecued by him. They were also the only consolation prize Hera had after being defeated by Yunshi and Golden Sun Crow. After all, Most fake and evil gods lurked in the abyss. It wasn't easy to catch them. Well, what can I do in a day? Naturally, the newborn golden sun crow had no common sense. She looked at Yuan-shi with curiosity in her golden pupils. That? A lot of things. Yuan-shi looked at the golden red bird. Having a headache. What should I do? Does anyone have the experience to deal with a golden red bird? Hey, the god really likes her. Red Lotus looked at May and Golden Sun Crow in surprise. Most gods summoned by witches, apart from the necessary responses after accepting the sacrifices, wouldn't say a word to the witches. Essentially, gods and witches were not equal at all. Apart from the few legend-ranked witches, gods wouldn't take a glance at any other witches. Chapter 517. A Date with the God, 1. Why don't you go on a date? White Lotus made an unusual proposal to Golden Sun Crow with a bright smile on her face. What? Red Lotus looked at her sister in astonishment, as if she had never known her sister, White Lotus, before. How can it be possible that my sister is so alive? As the witch who could master the great circulation, White Lotus didn't really believe in any gods. Why was she suddenly so enthusiastic about the golden red bird? May, let's go out on a date together. It's rare to date with a god. It would be an event that could be recorded in the history of the White Lotus sword domain. White Lotus squinted at Yuan-shi, who was as bewildered as Red Lotus. Yuan-shi tried to blink his eyes, suggesting that he had no experience in doing such things. White Lotus smiled and nodded, indicating that she knew it. However, it had been decided. Oh, I'll try this date. It must be interesting. Golden Sun Crow, who waved her wings and was very satisfied with White Lotus's proposal. What should I do now? Going on a date with a god. Yuan-shi had never heard of such a thing. He watched White Lotus fingertips draw a mysterious rune in the air, and then Golden Sun Crow's body transformed into a human. Transforming the incarnation of gods into human shape was also one of the unique secret skills the witches had. No matter how special the gods were, if they agreed to a contract with the witch, they could temporarily stay in the human world for a day. Because Golden Sun Crow was essentially still an unborn fantastic creature, her human form was a young girl about 7 or 8 years old, whose height wasn't taller than Yuan-shi's waist. Even so, her appearance had proved that she had great potential to be a beauty in the future. This could be confirmed by the eyes of the people who passed by them on the street. She wore golden red clothes that was gorgeous, had a beautiful oval face, tall nose, small red cherry lips, and bright eyes as if there were flames burning in her pupils. Rings wrapped with golden wires drooped on both sides of her cheek. Raising her beautiful eyebrows, she looked very proud. On her back, a pair of small golden wings stretched out with jeweled decorations on them, which were actually the blessings and protection the West Queen cast for her daughter. At this moment, the human-shaped Golden Sun Crow was holding Yuan-shi's hand, strolling around on the streets. White Lotus and Red Lotus cast a special magic of witches on themselves, making their bodies become invisible in ordinary people's eyes. In the eyes of the people on the street, they could only see Yuan-shi and a little girl holding each other's hand, strolling on the street. Looking down on the Golden Crow Princess, Yuan-shi could clearly see her moving, slender neck. His face blushed, and he quickly turned away. Undoubtedly, when the little Golden Crow Princess grew up, she would surely become an absolute beauty, but now she was still too young. To be honest, Yuan-shi even felt a little guilty when he remembered that he just asked for a priceless SN drive from this little girl. He felt as if he just deceived an ignorant child and robbed her of her treasure. Is that really good? Yuan-shi, aren't you a gentleman? Yuan-shi questioned himself in his heart. How would a gentleman deceive a young girl? My SN drive. Is the furnace easy to use? After touching Yuan-shi's hand for a while, Golden Crow Princess suddenly asked. That is, of course. It's very useful. Taking out the furnace, Yuan-shi skillfully lit the fire and toasted a piece of bread on the furnace. After a while, the bread emitted a pleasant smell. As he expected, the bread toasted on the furnace, sealed SN drive, would naturally contain the taste of the sun. Well, probably there wouldn't be any bread oven in the world better than this one. Of course, He would also use it to forge his first god weapon in the future. Long live the furnace. Goo! Looking at Yuan-shi eating the toasted bread, Golden Crow Princess couldn't help but swallow. It looks delicious. What's that soft, fragrant, golden food? Why isn't the information about this food in my inherited memory? Do you want to eat some? Yuan-shi tore off a piece of bread and handed it over to her. Probably in the endless god's domain. Only he would use an SN drive to toast bread. Yes. Golden Crow Princess smiled and grabbed the piece of bread from Yuan-shi's hand. She bit it in a very rude way. Wow. It's delicious. It's delicious. It wasn't only because of the power of the sun inside it, but also because it was the first time she ate food in her life. The bread itself was a piece of high-quality, hero-ranked bread. After being toasted on the furnace, even Yuan-shi himself was surprised and satisfied with its taste. Unfortunately, Huahua wasn't here. I really want to share this bread with her. Yuan-shi couldn't help but miss his childhood sweetheart. Is it really so delicious? Can you give me a piece of bread too? Looking at their pleased expression, White Lotus also felt curious and wanted to taste it. Well, it's just a loaf of bread. How delicious can it be? Red Lotus disdained. All right. Yuan-shi tore off a piece of bread. He hesitated for a moment, then divided it into 2 pieces and handed them to White Lotus and Red Lotus respectively. The simple action let White Lotus' eyes suddenly become gentle. My prince, you do understand. That's right. Only in this way is the correct answer. Well, bread is bread. I don't believe that it can contain other tastes. Red Lotus bit this piece of bread viciously as if she was biting a person. Incredibly, the taste on the tip of her tongue was a taste she had never tasted in her life. Yuan-shi was actually the only hero-ranked baker in the entire White Lotus Sword domain. Therefore, what Red Lotus tasted was the best bread in the entire White Lotus Sword domain. Moreover, this piece of bread was toasted on the furnace. It had naturally contained a trace of the power of the sun. Even though it was just a tiny bit of the power of the sun, it had made the hero-ranked bread become more delicious. So much so, that it was even beyond Yuan-shi's imagination. Ahoo! Red Lotus gorged, almost biting her tongue. Why? Why is this bread so delicious? Is it really bread? None of the bread she had ever tasted was as delicious as this piece of bread. No, none of the food she had ever tasted was as delicious as this piece of bread. Red Lotus didn't like this maid. However, she couldn't deny that May's bread was so delicious that she wanted to cry. She couldn't outrage her conscience and say that it wasn't delicious. Delicious. Red Lotus finally had to make her own comment honestly. It's delicious. It's delicious. Compared with Red Lotus, Golden Crow Princess's response was the most straightforward. In contrast to her sister, White Lotus nibbled the piece of bread bit by bit, letting the sweet and delicious taste spread out in her mouth, and then slowly entered her throat. Ah, it's great to find another advantage my prince has. My prince's handmade bread is really wonderful. Don't worry, there's still a lot of bread. Looking at White Lotus, Red Lotus, and Golden Crow Princess, Yuan-shi was a little embarrassed. He really didn't put anything strange in his bread. Why did all 3 of them look at him with such desire in their eyes, as if they were puppies waiting to be fed? Taking out a loaf of bread again, Yuan-shi skillfully toasted the bread on the furnace. Just now, it was only his first time using the furnace. His control of the furnace was more or less immature, and the temperature wasn't the best. This time, he had become more skilled in the use of the furnace. As a result, the smell of the toasted bread spilled out this time. Not only White Lotus, Red Lotus, and the Golden Crow Princess smelt it, but also the people on the street smelt it. What is the sweet smell? A businessman sniffed. His name was Li Yun, and he swore that although he had traveled around the entire Sky Sword God's domain, and as a big businessman, he was even qualified to enjoy the royal banquet in the Great Xia Sword domain, this was still the first time he smelt such an unusual aroma. Taking a gentle breath, his body could clearly feel the incredible warmth contained in the smell. Not only Li Yun, but also all the people on the street and in the stores smelt this irresistible fragrance. Without exception, everyone was captivated by the smell and could not help drooling. What's the scent? Are there any food stores selling this kind of delicacy? No, absolutely not. If there was such a food store, it would have been famous a long time ago. Is it a new food store which opened today? Is it advertising? No, I guess it's a chef who is publicizing his latest works. Soon, someone discovered the source of the aroma. It wasn't a new food store, nor a chef who temporarily set up a stall on the street. Ah, over there. It's from that maid. The thing in her hands. Wait, bread? She looked at the people flocking to him in embarrassment. Wait, what is this situation now? Chapter 518. A Date with the God, 2. Miss Maid, can you sell the bread in your hand to me? Li Yun was the first who rushed to Yun Shi. Just tell me the price. Money is never a problem for me. How long since the last time I've had this impulse? Just like that royal banquet in the great Xia Sword domain. When I first smelt the smell of barbecued male fiery dragon, the cells all over my body couldn't help cheering. This is it. It must be this. The best food in my dream, which is even more delicious than the meat of the male fiery dragon. As a famous gourmet and successful businessman in the Sky Sword God's domain, his dream was to eat different kinds of delicacies every day. Today, in front of him, there was an unknown delicacy that he had never tasted before. How can he let go of this opportunity? Wait a minute. I'll buy it too, Miss Maid. Make an offer. Don't grab it. What bread is it, Miss Maid? Do you have any more? Can you tell me who made it? Within a moment, Yunshi was surrounded by people who wanted to buy his bread, which made him feel both funny and annoyed. This bread is not for sale. As a former bread store owner, Yunshi never thought that his bread would have such a hot day. Unfortunately, this bread is really not for sale, because the bread was made of his hero-ranked baker ability, and it was toasted by the furnace. In fact, it was already a priceless treasure. Moreover, he could only store up 100 loaves of bread using his hero-ranked ability. All of them were his strategic stockpiles. At any rate, Yunshi wouldn't sell his valuable bread to ordinary people. He would only use them in the most important moments. At this moment, he presented his most precious bread to Golden Sun Crow and the Twin Witches. It meant that he really regarded them as important. Even his childhood sweetheart, Hua Hua, hadn't enjoyed this treatment, of course. The main reason was that he just obtained the furnace, SN Drive, from Golden Crow Princess and just began to learn to use it to toast bread. Not for sale. Li Yun looked depressed. After hearing his words, most people around Yunshi sighed, and some of them began to inquire about the origin of the bread. Miss Maid, can you tell me who made the bread? Was this bread made by Miss Maid herself? No way. How old is she? I'm sure it's definitely a masterpiece from a real, respectable old master of bread. Sorry, I can't tell you. Yunshi shook his head. After all, he couldn't expose his identity. Don't pretend. I tell you, you must sell it today. Finally, someone angrily rebuked. It was a young man dressed in the clothes of the servant of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Anyone could see his arrogance from his attitude. Go away, go away. I'm serving for the White Lotus Sword Palace. Mind your business. Being shouted at by the young people, almost all the people around him showed sympathy for Yunshi and quickly walked away. For most people living in the Sword Tip area, the White Lotus Sword Palace was the master of their entire world. Even if it was only a servant from the Sword Palace, they didn't dare to offend him. Only several people from other sword domains still looked at them with curiosity. White Lotus Sword Palace. Yunshi didn't understand why the young servant looked so proud after saying it. The servant walked to him with a haughty expression and then looked at him, stretching out his hand. This bread is good. I'm sure the witches of the Sword Palace will like it. Give me it. Hearing this, people around them couldn't help but worry more. In the White Lotus Sword Palace, the witches of the Witch Palace were the most prestigious people. Because of this, their servants also thought that they were superior to others outside the Sword Palace. His tone when saying, "Give me it," was so skillful. Perhaps he had been used to being rapacious to other people. The witches of the Sword Palace. Yunshi subconsciously looked at the twin witches with astonishment. What was this? Their servant was going to grab the witches and their god's bread? Let go of me. I'll reveal my true identity and tear this bastard to pieces. Realizing what a shameful thing she just witnessed, Red Lotus roared with anger. The person who dares to rob the god's bread must be punished by heaven. From now on, the witch palace wouldn't recruit any new male servants. Don't worry, you won't give away it for nothing. Generally, a loaf of bread costs only several copper coins. This bread smells really good. How about I pay 10 times the price higher than common bread? The young servant still didn't know that his superior, Red Lotus, was angrily staring at him. He looked at Yunxi with a smirking smile and rubbed his fingers in front of Yunxi. Li Yun stared at the servant in astonishment. The smell of the bread is even better than the smell of the barbecued male fiery dragon's meat. Can it be bought by 10 times the price of common bread? You're not buying but robbing. Sorry, I won't sell this bread. You'd better leave now. Looking at Red Lotus' grumpy face, Yunxi still wanted to save this young man. Everything has a price. If 10 times is not enough, how about 20 times the price of common bread? I always think that people should be more sensible in their lives. The young servant shook his finger in the air with a look of discontent. My name is Chi Hui. I'm the servant of the witch palace. If you give me the bread and let me present it to the twin witches, it would be a great honor for you. Oh, is this the so-called robbery? Golden Crow Princess opened her eyes wide looking at Chi Hui's confident face. No, it's called by force, princess. Don't look at this. Yunxi felt that it wasn't good for a child to see this scene, even though she was actually a god. This bastard. Shame on him. Red Lotus finally couldn't help it and drew out her Red Lotus holy sword. Countless sparks spread from the sword and made the temperature of the whole street rise. Why do I feel hot? Chi Hui raised his head and looked at the sky in confusion. Let me make it clear. Master Red Lotus and White Lotus want your bread. You have to sell it if you still want to live in the White Lotus sword domain. Finding that today's weather was somewhat unusual, Chi Hui was somewhat anxious and couldn't wait to grab Yunxi's bread. Red Lotus and White Lotus want the bread. Yunxi looked at Chi Hui with a strange look. Well, what he said was indeed correct. Yes, I like this bread very much. Suddenly, White Lotus' voice appeared behind Chi Hui. Yes, this bread is delicious, but I don't need you to buy it. Red Lotus gritted her teeth. Since White Lotus had appeared, she didn't need to hide anymore and naturally appeared beside White Lotus. Ha! Ha! Chi Hui was appalled. His mouth opened and closed like a salted fish stranded on the beach. Big drops of sweat kept streaming down from his forehead. I must be too tired. Yes, it's just a delusion. No, it's true. Don't delude yourself. Yunxi looked at Chi Hui with sympathy. He had tried to save Qin Hui, but he didn't realize it and catch the opportunity. Wait, I have something to say. I've done my best for the witch palace. I just want to buy the bread, and I'm going to pay for it. Shame on you. Is this how you do your best for the witch palace? Red Lotus cocked her eyebrows. She usually didn't take care of the daily affairs of the witch palace, but now, it seemed that this was a big mistake. Sure enough, none of the men in the world are good. You're fired now, right away. Get out of the sword tip area and you are never allowed to enter this area again. Red Lotus brandished her sword, and Chi Hui was instantly blown off to the sky. Of course, he wouldn't die, but after falling down to the ground, he had to stay in bed for more than 10 days, and the fact that he was punished by the twin witches personally was really a big blow to his life. Since this was no accident, there was no room for him in the White Lotus sword domain anymore. Well, I told you to leave. Yunxi sighed and shook his head. This bread is delicious. Watching this human comedy with great interest, Golden Crow Prince ate the third piece of bread. They are the twin witches. Master Red Lotus and Master White Lotus. Oh my God. People who looked at Yunxi with sympathy before now looked at Red Lotus and White Lotus in surprise. Pat. Some knelt down first, and just like dominoes that fell down, soon, people around Red Lotus and White Lotus all knelt down. Some old men even prayed to the twin witches in tears. Lord Witches, please bless my children to pass the entrance examination of the Sword Palace next year. Lord White Lotus, please let my children become smart. Lord Red Lotus, Please bless my grandson's wife to have a baby soon. Chapter 519. A Date with the God. 3. Oh my! Looking at the people kneeling on the ground densely around them, Red Lotus was embarrassed. They were indeed witches, but they were not the witches of gods. The witch palace treated all gods equally and traded with gods in the sacrificial ceremony. However, they didn't believe in any gods. Unfortunately, the vast majority of ordinary people couldn't distinguish this. Witches are the girls who serve the gods. Witches equal spokespersons for the gods, and they have incredible divine power, which is what witches were in the eyes of most ordinary people. Coupled with the fact that several legend-ranked witches were themselves gods, and this impression was made even more exacerbated. However, the legend-ranked god witches were just exceptions. They were as rare as the hair of a phoenix and the horns of a giraffe in the history of witches. Most witches could only live in reduced circumstances, collecting resources and increase their power via holding the sacrificial ceremony. As the young witch of the twin witches, the most powerful witch of battle in the White Lotus sword domain, it was easy for Red Lotus to eliminate her enemies. However, she had no clue when dealing with this kind of problem. Well, everyone, repeat after me. White Lotus obviously had a richer experience on dealing with these kinds of affairs. Amount needs not be high. It becomes noted when on it fairies dwell. A body of water needs not be deep. It would be ensouled if a dragon makes it its resting whereabouts. White Lotus is nowhere. It's right in our hearts. The old people kneeling on the ground repeated White Lotus's words devoutly, and their eyes become brighter and brighter, and their spirits were getting better and better. She blinked his eyes and watched the aura spreading quietly between White Lotus and Red Lotus hands. Undoubtedly, this was a high-ranked witch skill, which could silently influence all the people around them. It dispelled the darkness in their bodies and sprinkled morning dew-like aura from their hands. That's good. Biting the bread into her mouth, Golden Crow Princess praised them. Recalling the information he had seen in the Twin Witch's seed, she understood what secret skill they were using. White Lotus Holy Land. White Lotus Holy Land could bless all people within a range of 10 kilometers, which was a unique skill of the Twin Witches. After appeasing the believers, White Lotus smiled at Shi and then cast another spell. The 4 people disappeared on the street in an instant. Thank you, Lord White Lotus. Thank you, Your Highness Red Lotus. Long live our Twin Witches. The people who were cured by the White Lotus Holy Land spontaneously shouted the Twin Witches' names. If there was no accident, what happened here would soon spread throughout the entire White Lotus sword domain in a few days and become the people's topic of conversation. Several streets away, White Lotus once again cast the spell she had just used, sitting with her sister Red Lotus, Golden Crow Princess, and Shi in a dessert shop. When it came to dating girls, it's a must-do to come to a dessert store. I really can't stand that. After experiencing the incident just now, Red Lotus's attitude toward Shi was more or less softened. Are witches popular? Golden Crow Princess looked curiously at the twin witches who had just been worshipped as gods. They should be. It was just too much. Red Lotus nodded first, then shook her head. No matter how much people worshipped them, the situation just now was a bit abnormal, as if people had believed in her and White Lotus as real gods. They were only 16 years old, and when they saw the old people kneeling down to them, they could barely accept it. We are not gods. We should not be worshipped like that. I always feel sorry for everyone. Sister, you are too serious. They don't really expect us to satisfy their desires. They just need a ray of hope. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, no matter how slim and impossible that hope is, they will trust it and can create miracles. Compared with real miracles, hope is actually the greatest reliance people have. Absolute despair is the most terrible thing. White Lotus ordered the desserts and explained why she accepted people's worship. White Lotus, maybe you can really become a god someday. While enjoying the cold juice, Golden Crow Princess praised White Lotus. Gods weren't omnipotent. Even the West Queen, The creator of the Kunlun gods' domain had her own troubles. We witches pursue the power of gods and communicate with them, but we don't have to be gods. God Witch is a career from which human beings learn to understand and communicate with gods. Well, here's my banana milk, May. Let's enjoy it together. White Lotus suddenly changed the topic and put a large glass of fruit drink, decorated with ice, in front of Yunxi, without giving him any chance to refuse. Well, there's only one cup. Big drops of sweat fell on his forehead as he watched the goblet that was 3 times bigger than the common goblet. But there are 2 straws. White Lotus smiled like a child, pointing to a curly straw on the side of the goblet. This. Red Lotus looked at her smiling sister in astonishment, as if she was a complete stranger. When did her sister, White Lotus, become so enthusiastic? Her eyes were filled with a satisfied and happy smile. Where is her shy, timid sister? The sister who always hid behind her. May, let's drink together. White Lotus gave Yunxi one of the straws and said with a tempting breath. Yunxi wanted to say no, but somehow when he looked at White Lotus' eyes, he couldn't say anything. I'm just thirsty, just thirsty. I just ate too much bread and need to drink water. Yunxi blushed, hinting at himself, and approached the fruit drink. In front of his eyes was White Lotus' delicate face. They were so close that Yunxi could even feel the breath from White Lotus' nose. Which is sweeter, the banana dessert or White Lotus? It was really a question that was hard to answer. Red Lotus looked at her sister, who shared the same cup of fruit drink with Yunxi, and felt a strong sense of loss. From their childhood, she and White Lotus had never been separated for a second because of the invisible threads on their hands. They learned together, practiced together, bathed together, helped each other change clothes, and even fell asleep together. White Lotus and Red Lotus were inseparable. The relationship between them was closer than any sisters. Oh, is this really delicious? Golden Crow Princess watched them with curiosity. Great God, if you like it, try it. White Lotus recommended this drink that could increase her friendship with her. Yes, isn't drinking from the same cup of dessert the best interpretation of friendship? Good. Golden Crow Princess stood on her chair, laid her hands on the table, opened her little cherry mouth, and held the straw with expectation. Compared with Golden Crow Princess' tiny body, the table and chair in this dessert store were a little too big, which made Golden Crow Princess' behavior more lovely. Well, this feeling was like going shopping with your little daughter and buying her food. If only there wasn't the big sister who was staring at him in a hostile manner, everything would be better. Yummy! After half a cup of banana dessert, Golden Crow Princess satisfactorily returned to her sitting position and tilted her little feet with a happy look on her face. You are welcome, White Lotus said in a natural tone. Wait a minute. I'm thirsty too. For the first time, Red Lotus lied in front of White Lotus, and her heartbeat was so strong that she felt that such a lie would be exposed at once. Sister, drink. White Lotus didn't reveal her sister's clumsy lie and smiled, handing Red Lotus her straw. Coo, coo, goo. Red Lotus took White Lotus' place and stared at the maid sitting on the other side, sipping the cold and refreshing fruit drink. Don't rush, sister. White Lotus chuckled. Red Lotus stared at Yunxi as if she was a big gray wolf who was looking at a little white rabbit. Yunxi kept silent and tried to ignore Red Lotus' eyes. Red Lotus sipped the drink and continued to threaten Yunxi with her evil eyes. Yunxi still kept silent and tried to show his goodwill with a smile. Crack! Red Lotus almost bit off the straw. She raised her eyebrows like an angry dragon. You're not Huahua, you are just a maid. Why does White Lotus think so much of you? She not only let you attend our precious sacrificial ceremony, but also invited you to share the fruit drink with her. Even I myself had never come here with White Lotus and shared the same cup of dessert in such an embarrassing way. I'm so envious of you. No, it's so uninteresting. If you can understand what I'm thinking through my eyes, You'd better quickly release the straw and immediately disappear for me. She showed a bitter smile. He really wanted to immediately disappear from here, running away from this which who was staring at him with killing intention in her eyes. Unfortunately, this wasn't something he could make a decision on. If he said that he wanted to leave, White Lotus wouldn't allow it, and more importantly, Golden Crow Princess, who was curious about his palm print, wouldn't allow it either. Oh, I really want to become a fish and swim in the vast sea, or turn into a bird, flying in the endless sky. For the first time, Yunshi found that freedom was such a luxurious right. After studying Yunshi's palm print, Golden Crow Princess showed a very satisfied smile on her face. Great God, physiognomy? White Lotus looks at Golden Crow Princess' smiling face with curiosity. No, but May's hands are beautiful, soft and comfortable. Golden Crow Princess didn't hide her mind at all. Her little face turned red because of excitement, looking like a pink apple. Oh, of course, it's very soft. White Lotus narrowed her eyes and wasn't sure whether Golden Crow Princess was joking or taking it seriously. She had used her secret skill, the Great Circulation, to predict her future with the prince many times, but all she got was no accurate result every time. Mortals followed a fixed trajectory of life. Therefore, it was easy to predict their future using the Great Circulation. Hero-ranked beings had the ability to modify their own trajectory of life. It was very difficult to predict their futures. The accuracy rate of her Great Circulation was only about 30%. As for the legend-ranked beings, basically no one can predict their future, unless it was a legend-ranked being who had the same ability as Ouroboros. Unfortunately, till now the only well-known hero-ranked prophet was Ouroboros, and every time it predicted the future, it would be unable to predict again for many years. The fact that the Great Circulation couldn't figure out the future of the prince only meant one thing: that the fate of the prince was far beyond any people's imagination. Every time she used the Great Circulation, she could see distinct futures. In the first future she had seen, the prince would become the owner of a small bread store and give up his childhood, marrying 3 or 4 girls in the small town, having a lot of children with them. And this was also the commonest and most deceptive future. In the second future, it seemed that at the age of 18, he would meet a miss of a rich family and fall in love with her at first sight. After that, he would give up his childhood sweethearts and leave the small town, and then get involved in the inheritance dispute of a country and become the lover of a queen. Incidentally, this queen was now the leader of the Starwing Knights, Hua Yu. In the third future, he would be lost in the mountains and then accidentally meet a girl who had just awakened her fighting talent. He would join the team formed by the girl and becomes an excellent supporter. Finally, he and the girl would get married and travel around the world. The girl who saved the prince in the third future was now also in the Starwing Knights. Her name was Xiao Chao. White Lotus had calculated 37 different futures. It could be said that every girl of Starwing Knights had a special relationship in their future with the prince. In these futures, the prince's identity was constantly changing, but there was only one thing unchanged. Amongst all the futures, the prince would marry more than one girl. Amongst all the futures, his invincible childhood sweetheart, Hua Hua, would become a loser. She would be knocked out of the competition even before the competition began. Finally, no matter which future it was, she and her sister didn't even appear once. Judging from this, White Lotus guessed that these futures may have existed in the past, but they must all be over now. From the moment they and the prince met in the dark forest, the wheel of fate had been turned to a completely different direction. It also meant that the futures she observed were just the futures that existed in the past. When the twin witches and the prince encountered each other, their futures had been forever changed. No, maybe even earlier, their fate had been connected with the prince. The more White Lotus observed the prince, the more threads of fate she could find that were being projected from all directions of the vast sky, twining around the prince. This also led to a result that anyone who wanted to predict the prince's fate couldn't get the right answer. No one, not even a god, could figure out all his threads of fate. Well, is this also a talent of the prince? In the dessert store, Yunshi, White Lotus, and Red Lotus finally finished the fruit drink. and he could finally run away from Red Lotus' murderous eyes. Of course, it was just Yunshi's imagination. His name, Mei, had been recorded on Red Lotus' blacklist as the second target. What? Do you want to know who the first person is on the list? Of course, it was the prince who stole her sister's first kiss in the dream. Because of him, Red Lotus was extremely sensitive to any clues related to the prince. If she could, she would immediately pull the prince out of the dream right now and burn him to death with fire. Your sister is dangerous. Yunshi communicated with White Lotus through his eyes. Well, it won't be a big problem as long as you don't tell her the truth. In front of her sister, White Lotus and Yun, she sent speechless messages with their eyes. Red Lotus had a terrible foreboding, which was very, very bad. The problem is, she couldn't find the problem. At present, the maid named Mei did not have any physical contact with White Lotus. She was just helping Golden Crow Princess to comb her long hair. She only looked at White Lotus occasionally, which wasn't a good reason for her to look for trouble. White Lotus squinted and looked softly at the maid who was helping Golden Crow Princess comb her hair. Everything seemed normal. However, in this normal situation, Red Lotus has noticed some abnormalities. There was a tacit understanding between them. When the maid occasionally looked up, her sister would also look at her as well. Red Lotus sensed a very strange, but also familiar feeling from it. It was an intuition of twins. When White Lotus was happy, Red Lotus would be happy. When White Lotus was lost, Red Lotus wouldn't laugh either. The twins of fate shared the same fate in life, heart, and soul. When White Lotus said that she liked the prince in their dream, Red Lotus never regarded it as a joke, because she really felt the happiness, sweetness, and even some delusions that White Lotus should not have even in her heart. Comparing herself with White Lotus, who was always introverted and not good at expressing her true feelings, Red Lotus was the type that couldn't hide the emotions in her heart at all. Straightforward, enthusiastic, impulsive, this was her character. She was like a burning flame, burning herself, but it was also easy for her to hurt others. She couldn't be a witch like White Lotus. She was a witch fighting with her sword. No, I shouldn't just look at this going on. Red Lotus instinctively tried to stop them. Unfortunately, White Lotus also knew her sister well. She subconsciously noticed Red Lotus' plan. Before Red Lotus did anything, she had stopped having any eye contact with Yunshi. It's a pity, but the sweet time with my prince is over. Us twin sisters liked the same person at the same time, and was easy to be found out, only my sister herself was still desperately trying to refuse to accept the reality. For the future of my sister and the prince, let's take it easy. Next time, I'd better do it when my sister is sleeping. White Lotus pinched her fingers and soon worked out the next love plan. Well, that was the little trick of a witch who mastered the great circulation. And soon, there will be a big event that would even shock my sister. White Lotus calculated the time and found that it was coming. Ding! The first sound was from the Sky Tower, which was the sound of the beginning. The second sound came from the God Tower, which was the sound of ensemble. The third sound was from the Dragon Tower, which was a hymn of praise. From the Sky Tower, the God Tower, the Dragon Tower, and all the other towers in the endless gods' domains all echoed the bell that shocked souls. From the easternmost peak of the Kunlun God's domain to the northernmost dragon nest in the Dragon God's domain. From the city of Sigil where gods lived to the city of ghosts, which was covered by endless darkness. Even in the sea of chaos, the bell could be heard. What is this? Red Lotus was really shocked. She could not help but stand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. A total of 7 bells. Similar bells had appeared in the history of the endless gods' domain before. All the civilizations connected by the star bridges understood the meaning of the bells. Naturally, as the future master of the White Lotus Sword domain, Red Lotus knew it well. 7 bells. The same like the time when Cassina became the legend. Red Lotus' body was trembling. 7 bells represented an announcement to the entire endless gods' domain. A new legend had appeared. No, it couldn't be just a common legend-ranked being, but a legend above all legend-ranked beings. Only those who created unthinkable myths among the 7 towers were entitled to let the 7 towers play the bell of blessing at the same time. Last time, The person who achieved this was Cassina. In the Battle Gods Championship contest, she defeated all her opponents and became the legend of the championship contest. Now, which legend-ranked creature, had created a new myth and been recognized by the Seven Towers? When the first bell echoed in the endless gods' domains, countless ancient, sacred, and evil beings raised their heads at the same time. All strong beings knew its meaning. It wasn't something that any individual or force, even a god, could control. Only the legend above all legends could be recognized by the Seven Towers at the same time. Under an ancient tree, the three goddesses sat on the right hand of the one-eyed old man, Norn the god of wisdom, and looked at the light of the god tower. At this moment, it was time to witness the birth of a new legend, a myth that shone like Cassina, the battle god. The bells of the Seven Towers ring only for one person. My Cassina. Are you really Cassina? In the dragon's nest of the dragon god's domain, Orfina woke up from her long sleep and murmured, listening to the bells. Sure enough, the Seven Towers also acknowledged that this is a new myth. Unexpectedly, in such a short period of time, the Seven Towers would recognize two legends. The Eastern God's domain is really an incredible place. Haha, let's pay tribute to the new legend. Realizing that they had witnessed the birth of the new myth with their own eyes, all the legend-ranked Star Go players applauded in their own ways. Stars explode. In the Sea of Chaos, Black Mage detonated 13 stars that had reached the end of their lives. My legion, salute. Duke Roman raised his arms and shouted in front of his legion. Benefactor, you are predestined with Buddha. Amitabha. In the holy place of Buddha, Maha Mystery chanted a mantra. Time in the dragon, expectation in the dragon, perplexity in the dragon, reality in the dragon, illusion in the dragon, fate in the dragon, reason in the dragon, love in the dragon. If love songs are sounded on the quiet earth, the gears will turn wildly and open up the endless fate. Resurrect and sing. For our love, for our story, for our eternal lover. On the gemstone cast planet, Orfina sang heartily, describing her thoughts for her lover and her vision for the future. Even if they were separated by vast worlds, she had decided that she would cross the star sea again and go to her lover's side. In the Mechanist God's domain, suddenly appeared numerous meaningless symbols in the quantum network. They were the radio waves released by Cyber Elf Alpha. They were the whispers of the newborn cyber god. Lilla 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 I lilla lilla 2 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3. La 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 la. In the god crystal, the silver-haired girl sang aloud. The voice she uttered was not within the range of a human's ears. Naturally, they wouldn't be understood by human beings. They were the mysterious sounds of countless data. They were the sounds plucked by the strings used to analyze the basic particles of the world. It was an electronic song that only Cyber Elf Alpha could create and sing. The existences who could understand this song and give feedback were only the quadrant computers in different planets. Alpha's song was injecting new power into these huge quadrant computers, unlocking their wisdom and making them evolve to be a new kind of electronic intelligent lives. Gods had their own people. As the only electronic god in the endless gods domains, Cyber Elf Alpha was arousing her people. The quadrant computers were her people. They absorbed the soul fragments emanating from Alpha's song and started to evolve their own souls. The birth of Cyber Elf Alpha was like the first ray of light on the horizon, giving birth to the quadrant computers. At this moment, Alpha was trying to let her opponent, the legend she wanted to challenge, hear her voice in this manner. The bells of the Seven Towers would only echo for the most outstanding and legendary people in the endless gods domain. The last person who obtained this glory was Cassina, the battle god. Today, the glory was obtained by the person who defeated all wise men on the starry sky chessboard. The master of Star Go a cloud in the sky, Yun Shi, The Sky Tower. The Master of Star Go. The Master of Star Go achieved 100 victories in a row and defeated all legend-ranked opponents. One message after another came from the Sky Tower. The myth Yoon she created on the chessboard finally turned into a huge, tsunami-like impact, spreading throughout the endless worlds that were connected by all the star bridges. The reason why it wasn't announced immediately was that this achievement needed to be recognized by all 7 towers. Only after being examined and verified many times would it be officially announced throughout the endless gods' domains. Today was the day when the title The Master of Star Go was unanimously recognized by the 7 towers and announced to everyone. Most mysteriously, even now, no one knew his true identity. Everyone only knew his codename on the starry sky chessboard, a cloud in the sky. However, this wouldn't prevent the 7 towers from giving him notification of the highest glory in the endless gods' domains. The Master of Star Go. Someone actually achieved such a title. Even Red Lotus, who knew nothing about Star Go, knew how difficult it was to be a formal Star Go player, not to mention to be called the Master of Star Go. I heard that he was a hermit before he appeared in front of the public. This time, there was also a cyber god, Alpha, who achieved 70 victories in a row on the starry sky chessboard, but she was also defeated by the Master of Star Go. White Lotus exclaimed with respect. White Lotus also played Star Go, so she had known this news early. Anyone who liked to play Star Go had knew about the miracle created by a cloud in the sky before the first bell. Because of him, the starry sky chessboard was finally officially open to players, and the integral rule also changed. The Master of Star Go is the only chess player above 10 star points. Only the chess players who have earned 10 star points can challenge him. Watching White Lotus' excited face while she was talaking, Yoon she had a kind of delusion as if he had been separated from the world. He just want to play the chess game. Why did the 7 towers make such an announcement for him? Isn't Star Go just a simple and easy-to-understand game? May, you are awesome. Golden Crow Princess was probably the only person who knew that Yunshi was the Master of Star Go here, who was summoned by him on the starry sky chessboard. No, I just had a bit of good luck. My teacher thought that I have a talent, so I went there. Up to now, Yunshi still thought that it was arranged by Cassina for him to play on the starry sky chessboard. Without Cassina's identity, he was not even qualified to enter the Sky Tower, let alone play chess on the starry sky chessboard. Well, where did you go? White Lotus asked with curiosity. That's, I and May did this and that, beat down our opponents like this and that. Golden Crow Princess waved her little hand happily as if she had returned to the moment she first met Yunshi on the chessboard. It was a game. It was a simple game. Yunshi quickly said. Well, it was a very interesting game. May is the best. Golden Crow Princess took Yunshi's hand with a happy look. How about playing that game with me next time, May? White Lotus smiled at Yunshi, which made Yunshi sweat profusely. He felt as if her gentle eyes had seen through everything. Imagination. It must be just my imagination. Bang! Boom! Crack! 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 In the sky, different colored fireworks began to burst out one after another. Not only in the White Lotus Sword domain, but all over the gods' domains. There were also innumerable people who spontaneously set off fireworks for the Master of Star Go. Especially in the area covered by the Sky Tower, all gods' domains had fallen into a festival-like fever, just as last time. The bell of the 7 towers echoed for Cassina, the battle god. For ordinary people, it was a rare big event to hear the bell of the 7 towers. When Cassina was awarded the title Battle God, many famous families' ancestors were still babies. In the Water God's Fantasy Island, Cassina and Orfina were sneaking into the basement of the Water God Temple, trying to find Hydra's poisonous wine. They also heard the announcement, and they were also shocked by it. The Master of Star Go. So someone can actually take the title of that difficult game. Hiccup. That damn place is full of the trajectories of stars. I will never go there even if I die. In her human form, Orfina was laying down in Cassina's arms. The drunken two looked like a pair of good sisters in this situation. I have the same feeling. I won't play Star Go in my life, even if it's at Orfina's request. The drunken battle god. Cassina raised the poisonous wine in her hand and said so. In the haze of drunkenness, Cassina always felt as if she had forgotten something. Well, what is it? Out of the dessert store, Yunshi found that the birth of the master of Stargo was more shocking than he had imagined. Almost all the streets were in some kind of indescribable fanaticism. One after another, stores opened their doors and displayed all kinds of delicacies and drinks without reservation. Free, free, all free. In order to celebrate the birth of the Stargo master, all the drinks and food today are free. Come here, come here. Roast lamb, roast cattle, roast camel, all free to eat. This was the loudest cry that could be heard. The businessmen who always fought over the smallest trifles all became generous today. Once in 1,000 years. I didn't expect to hear the bell of the 7 towers once in my lifetime. Which legend rank person is he? It's amazing. Hurry up, today is absolutely a day of luck. It's a good day to have a baby. Stargo, I will also let my children learn Stargo. What Yunshi saw and heard now was only a small corner in the sword tip area of the entire White Lotus sword domain. He could never imagine what the title master of Stargo represented for the Sky Sword God's domain. At this moment, many people stayed awake all night just to study his steps on the starry sky chessboard. When he strolled around the streets, countless wise men who had white hair, including many gods, Tinjin, Tinjin, Tinjin. Both Cyber Elf Alpha and the Master of Stargo placed their first chess piece onto Tinjin. Is it really the best move? I must figure out the secret behind it. In the past, no one paid attention to Tinjin, but now, all chess players went crazy for it. The God of Wisdom, Orfina the Ruby Dragon, Black Mage, Duke Rome, Maha Mystery. Even Cyber Elf Alpha herself was studying it, and they were surprised by the terrible power of Starburst every time. After watching the duel between Cyber Elf Alpha and a cloud in the sky, after witnessing the terrible Starburst, looking back on the master of Stargo's games before, even his common moves became mysterious in their eyes. It was so arrogant of me to think that I had an advantage and could even defeat the master of Stargo. Black Mage sighed. The master of Stargo really had a good temper. He could actually patiently play the game with me. Cassina, 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 why don't you tell me? Orfina rolled on the ground, acting like a spoiled child. In the results of the 377,632 calculations, my winning probability is always 0. Looking at the calculation results in front of her, Alpha's clear eyes were filled with sorrow. She had evolved all the quadrant computers and upgraded her calculator program, but no matter how she calculated, her winning probability was still 0. This terrible talent. Why had I never heard of it? At the end, which legend-ranked god he is? Is he a primitive god of the ancient Eastern gods domain? A cloud in the sky. What's the meaning of this name? Is his true body a cloud? Overnight, the name of the master of Stargo resounded through the endless gods' domains. Teacher Cassina, this joke is just too big. Looking at the streets and the fireworks exploding in the sky, Yunshi's eyes became empty as if he had become a great monk. Even in the daylight, there were places where the sun couldn't shine. As long as there were people, there would be darkness. There would be places where sunshine couldn't reach. Even in such a busy festival, there was still such a quiet place, as if it had been forgotten by the world. Fireworks, festivals, celebrations. Wrapped in a dark cloak, her body almost completely merged with the shadows under the eaves. The elf girl watched the fireworks exploding in the sky. She just paused a little and walked into the ruins. Obsidian, open the door. Speaking out her code name, the dark elf girl opened the door hidden in the ruins. Only a few people could open the door in all of the White Lotus Sword domain. This was the secret stronghold set up by the 10 Leaves Alliance, which provided logistical supplies and intelligence for the elites of the 10 Leaves Alliance. Originally, White Lotus Sword domain was not qualified to let the 10 Leaves Alliance set up a stronghold, but because of the existence of a certain someone, White Lotus Sword domain had become special. The magic door hidden in the ruins was only opened by those who were stained with blood. Behind the door was an open hall, which didn't exist anywhere in the ruins. Only those who could open the door could get here and disappear completely from the White Lotus Sword domain if necessary. However, what slightly surprised the Dark Elf girl was that there was another person here this time. The person wore a scarlet cloak, like being dyed red by blood, emitting an ominous odor. Several blue-backed and red-breasted birds perched on the red cloak and emitted a faint red light from time to time. When Obsidian stepped into the stronghold, the birds seemed to wake up and spread their wings around the figure covered by the bright red cloak, making a crisp and melodious song. It was a cruel, tragic, cold ballad, which was spoken by these birds in a melodious and beautiful voice. "Who killed C***K Robin?" "I," said the sparrow, "with my bow and arrow. I killed C***K Robin." "Who saw her die?" "I," said the fly, "with my little eye. I saw her die." "Who caught her blood?" "I," said the fish, "with my little dish. I caught her blood." "Who'll make the shroud?" "I," said the beetle, "with my thread and needle. I'll make the shroud." "Who'll dig her grave?" "I," said the owl, "with my little trowel. I'll dig her grave." "Who'll be the parson?" "I," said the rook, "with my little book. I'll be the parson." "Who'll be the clerk?" "I," said the lark, "if it's not in the dark, I'll be the clerk." "Who'll carry the link?" "I," said the linnet, "I'll fetch it in a minute. I'll carry the link." "Who'll be chief mourner?" "I," said the dove, "I mourn for my love. I'll be chief mourner." "Who'll carry the coffin?" "I," said the kite, "if it's not through the night, I'll carry the coffin." "Who'll bear the pall?" "We," said the wren, "both the C***K and the hen. We'll bear the pall." "Who'll sing a psalm?" Chapter 526, Robins and Yunke 2, Clap, Clap. Robin clapped her hands gently. "Welcome to the Road of Blood, young bird. Do you think of your new code?" Obsidian took a deep breath. "Once you choose the blood stamen, you need to choose a brand new code to declare your separation from your identity when you were still immortal. According to the convention of the 10 Leaves Alliance, this code is mostly related to birds. At present, the code name of the strongest killer of the 10 Leaves Alliance was God Phoenix. No one had ever seen her real body. No one knew her deeds. She just appeared and became the strongest killer. My new code name will be Yunke, Skylark. Why did I choose this code? Originally, I was planned to be called Blackfeather once I reached the hero rank. Perhaps it was for the memory of that person. Yunhai, Cloud Sea, and Yunke, Skylark, the two people who once went hand in hand, but ultimately slid past each other. Yunke. I didn't expect you would choose that master's name as your code name. Well, congratulations. From now on, you are the new blood stamen of the 10 Leaves Alliance. As a witness, I declare that from now on, your code name is Yunquebec. A lark in the sky, a sad bird. Robin gazed at Obsidian, who had announced her new code. Her bloody cloak caressed the bloodstone in the base, modifying Obsidian's code name. Choosing the Road of Blood Stamens meant that she could never go back. A blood-colored key appeared on the bright red stone and automatically locked Obsidian's body. For whom is the door of blood opened? Are you or you? Birds in nightmares have no wings. There is no hope for those who give up the golden branch and the jade leaves. As if cursed, the key made a mockery sound, as if telling Obsidian that her choice was totally wrong. Those who chose Bloodstamen would no longer have the possibility of returning to the world under the sun, but would continue to fall deeper and deeper into the darkness, unable to turn back. I know. Obsidian reached out her hand and grasped the blood-red key. Once she decided something, she would never regret it. No pain, no gain. She believed that this was the price she must pay. Another fool. Unfortunately, there are so many fools in the world. Those who open this door are ready to go to hell. Only blood can witness the highest crown. The moment Obsidian grabbed the blood-red key, countless lights of blood interlaced, covering her tiny body, and then took her away. The road of blood trial has begun. Those who chose Bloodstamen would get the strength they desire from this road, but at the same time, they would pay a huge price. The same choice. The road of Bloodstamen is not easy to follow. After Obsidian was taken away by the blood-red key, Robin shrugged her shoulders and began to weave the outline of the target this time. Birds flew over Robin's head and sang ominous nursery rhymes. He's there, he's here, he's in many places, but he's never seen himself. Why is he so careful? Why nobody can see him? Clearly he is here. He has a sun-like smile. He has jewel-like long hair. He has pearl-like beautiful jewelry. He is beautiful and lovely. He is the princess above all princesses. He is the prince above all princes. Oh, poor princess. His life is destined to be calamitous. Oh, poor prince. He always wants to run away from the wedding. He can't run away. He can't run away. He can't run away. He'll have a bloody ending, and nobody can save him. Robin frowned and looked at the description of the target in her note. This was her killing magic, the unfortunate prophecy of the robin. The killed robin was full of hatred for the world. In order to revenge the sparrow who killed it, it created this magic. According to the robin's prophecy, she could weave a rough outline of the target and even lock the target's position, so that the death curse would be completed silently. However, the target this time was just too strange. In the task she received, the target was a 16-year-old boy who killed a disciple of the Heavens Road Palace. However, how could it be possible that a 16-year-old boy had a sun-like smile, jewel-like long hair, and pearl-like beautiful jewelry? The princess above all princesses, the prince above all princes. What does this mean? Moreover, according to the prophecy, even if Robin did nothing, this unlucky boy wouldn't live long. Robin's prophecy could only bring misery. It would never bring happiness to people. Like her, she was cursed by her fate. She once yearned for the bright world of golden branches and jade leaves, but finally, she stepped onto the road of Bloodstamen. Robin brought her strength and glory. At the same time, it was blood, it was killing. Well, it's time to go. Let me see where the prince is and who he is. Pushing open the door in the ruins, the original bloody cloak suddenly unfolded, revealing the seemingly plain face. However, if any people looked at her at this time, they would find that her glittering, translucent, jewel-like pupils gave them a feeling of strangeness. Yunshi stopped and looked at the bright red figure coming out of the corner of the street. Looking at her plain face, apart from a few blue-backed red-breasted birds on her shoulders, he could hardly find any unique features from her appearance. Yunshi didn't know why he suddenly noticed this woman. Although the red cloak was slightly conspicuous, she didn't have any other special features. Her height was average, her shoulder width was average, her chest was average, her face was average. All of her features were ordinary. However, only her eyes were full of color, like a pair of gemstones lost deep in the water. Perhaps it was because all the other features were average which made her eyes become particularly noticeable. The princess above all princesses, the prince above all princes. Robin stopped at a corner of the street and gazed at the target. She wore golden and red gorgeous clothes. Her hair was like golden sun. Her gorgeous hair ornaments reflected golden lights, and her face was apparently beyond the standard of mortals. Robin's prophecy didn't give her the exact location of the target, but gave her a general scope and characteristics which needed her to find the right target herself. At this moment, that answer was clear. Indeed, this target could be called the princess above all princesses and the prince above all princes. Although she looked too young, but referring to some races whose children's physical development was particularly slow, it seemed that 16 years old was acceptable. The most important thing was, no one in the range of Robin's prophecy was more like the sun than this target. At this age, the concept of gender was also vague. It was hard to determine whether the target was a girl or a boy in lovely clothes. So, is this boy-girl the target she must kill? She felt that there was something wrong. Originally, Heaven's Road Palace used a special method to trace the location of the target, but they failed halfway for some unknown reason. So this task was posted to the Tin Leaves Alliance. Indeed, the target in the task was a 16-year-old boy who could defeat a third-ranked green hippo, so the boy may have reached the hero rank. Has she reached the hero rank? Robin frowned and looked at Golden Crow Princess. She was not sure about the accuracy of the information. It seemed that there were some mistakes in the information submitted by Heaven's Road Palace. It was hard to describe that feeling. The girl looked as if she even lacked the strength to truss up a chicken, but when Robin looked at her, she felt an overwhelming sense of pressure. Perhaps she hadn't obtained that kind of power, but when she grew up in the future, she would inevitably become unimaginably strong. Moreover, even now, it was almost impossible to assassinate her. Robin could clearly feel that there was some very powerful force that was protecting this golden-haired girl and the maid beside her. How did the disciple of the Heaven's Road Palace provoke such a person? It was not surprising that he was killed by her. If she hadn't taken this task, no one in the Tin Leaves Alliance would have been able to accomplish it. She would use her secret skill, the unfortunate prophecy of the robin, which had never failed before. The mode of this secret skill was a mystery, and many people who published tasks were reluctant to pay her because in their eyes, the death of the targets had zero relationships with her. Almost all the targets killed by Robin were killed by accidents. An invincible general died of the king's suspicion. A wise counselor died from the jealousy of his colleagues. A romantic poet died in a duel with his rival. All of them died in accidents, therefore, nobody could prove that their death was because of Robin. Her secret skill was too strange and beyond the imaginations of ordinary people. Over time, even other killers kept away from Robin, and the name of Blood Robin had become a taboo in all of the dark world of assassins. The unfortunate prophecy of the Robin was such a terrifying secret skill for assassinating, and her code name Robin was from the robins on her shoulders. How to kill the target? Robin asked the birds on her shoulders. Her assassination had entered the second stage. He's there. He wants to be a bird and fly freely in the sky. He wants to be a fish and swims happily in the ocean. Why? He can go everywhere, but he can't go anywhere? Is it a conspiracy or an invisible chain that binds him? Robin sang melancholy songs on her shoulders. Go, go, become his wings, become his tail, fly together with him, swim together with him, then watch him fall down, fall down, fall down fiercely. In that case, he will surely die. Robin hesitated for a moment. This prediction was slightly strange, but she believed the birds more than anyone else. Only misery was true. There was no happiness in this world for her, so as long as she approached any person, the person would inevitably take a wrong turn into a miserable life. Gee, she is walking to us? She looked at the woman and found that she was walking towards them. Clearly, she was coming for him. What should I do? Do I need to tell the twin witches? I feel that there is something strange. White Lotus, is she an enemy? Red Lotus also noticed the woman. Ordinary people wouldn't even have the thought of approaching Golden Crow Princess in their minds. After all, she was a god. Her aura and the special magic White Lotus and Red Lotus cast on her body were enough to drive away ordinary people. This woman in a red cloak was obviously unusual. No, she looks like a colleague. White Lotus pinched her finger and predicted. She found that the woman in the bright red cloak didn't seem hostile or murderous. The spiritual aura around her body was so low that she looked as if she had been cursed and wrapped in gloom. From White Lotus's point of view, this was the sign of having used a kind of special divination too many times, which had overdrawn her vitality and even her future. This was the inevitable price to pay for peeping into destiny. Even though Ouroboros was a strong, fantastic creature, it couldn't often observe the future, let alone ordinary augurs. White Lotus's great circulation wasn't a kind of divination, but a result achieved by calculation. Even so, she needed to pay a huge price for it. If it wasn't because her mentality was far stronger than others, it wouldn't be possible for her to master this secret skill. Hello, I'm an augur. Do you need my service? Robin naturally walked to Yunshi and didn't even take a glance at Golden Crow Princess. Usually, she wouldn't directly contact her target, but start from the people around the target. This was Robin's killing method. There was no need to kill, and she held no hostility. This was the reason why she could accomplish the task without being noticed every time. Who could have imagined that she didn't need to dirty her hands when she was killing? Since she didn't have to do it herself, she naturally didn't need to be hostile and murderous to the target. She could even approach the target with goodwill. Her secret skill, the unfortunate prophecy of the Robin, had 3 stages. The first stage was to find the target, predict the outline of the target, and then write it in a notebook, making it become an unfortunate nursery rhyme. The second stage was to approach the target, find out the target's weakness and characteristics. After that, she would begin to weave the target's death according to the nursery rhymes on the notebook. As for the third stage, it would naturally happen, leading the target to an end full of blood and unfortunate death. Starting with the unfortunate nursery rhymes sung by the birds, the target's death would become destined. So far, the longest any of her targets survived was 100 days. She didn't kill the target with her own hands, but just came and witnessed the target's inevitable death. Apart from legend-ranked beings, who wouldn't be affected by her secret skill at all, no one could survive from her curse. If it wasn't because it was too difficult to master this secret skill, it may be the most horrible killing secret skill in the hero rank. Oh, divination? She looked curiously at the mysterious woman in a bright red cloak. So, she was an augur. Sure enough, she is a colleague. White Lotus didn't feel surprised. She and Red Lotus appeared in front of Robin together. In contrast, the people on the street still couldn't see them. This was White Lotus' strengthened hidden skill. She showed herself in front of the augur because she was curious about the prediction this augur would make. There was no doubt that this augur had true skill and genuine knowledge. Therefore, her divination would be precious. Ordinary people thought that augurs could predict all futures, but it was just a delusion. No one could really predict the future, not even gods. Even if the augur only predicted a very small part of the future, the augur would also need to pay a great price. The more specific the future was, the higher the cost would be. Therefore, most powerful augurs rarely predicted the future. However, none of the human beings and other races weren't curious about their future. In order to see the future, they dared to trample on all the rules and pay all the costs. Curiosity was probably the original sin of all intelligent lives. Even gods weren't exceptions. It was said that the twilight of the gods was because of a prophecy. White Lotus wanted to know what kind of future this unknown hero-ranked augur had seen, so that she approached Golden Crow Princess actively. It should be impossible to prophesy about the future of Golden Crow Princess. Her great circulation couldn't predict anything about Golden Crow Princess because it was beyond her limit. However, she predicted by using calculation. Among the factions of prophecy, there was another faction, which was commonly known as mysterious prediction. The augurs of this faction may have a poor computational ability, but they had an instinctive intuition and could often make predictions that couldn't be calculated. If there was a 1/1,000,000th possibility that a future would happen, her great circulation would totally ignore this future. However, the augurs of mysterious prediction could often catch this 1/1,000,000th possibility and believed that it would happen for no reason. In this way, there would be a strange phenomenon. Out of 99% of predictions building on calculation, calculation was more accurate than mysterious predictions. For example, if it was to predict the future of a world, White Lotus could predict the development of the cultivation in the world, the degenerating stage of the world, and even the destruction of the world. If a world entered the stage that no mana existed, and all fantastic creatures had died, the probability of the death of that world would be 100%. In theory, there would be no other possibility at all. However, the augurs of mysterious predictions could discover some incredible futures. For example, the world would be saved by a hero who should never have appeared, married all the fantastic creatures in this world, and let the entire world renew again. In White Lotus' eyes, this possibility didn't even exist, but in the eyes of the augurs of mysterious prediction, even if such a thing only appeared once, the truth would no longer be the truth. Calculation was still defective. Even if the augurs of calculation hated it and even shouted out, "That's impossible. This is unrealistic. This future will never happen." There was still a very small chance that the future predicted by mysterious prediction would happen. As one of the few witches who could master the secret skill, the Great Circulation, White Lotus could distinguish at a glance that the woman in bright red cloak was definitely an augur of mysterious prediction. In legend, the stronger the augurs were, the shorter their lives were. This was the cost of capturing the future from the lines of infinite possibilities. In White Lotus' eyes, this mysterious augur in front of her looked as if she would die at any time, which made her feel that she must be strong. Not all people were willing to predict the future at the cost of their lives. Therefore, White Lotus was curious about what this mysterious augur had seen and what she could predict. "Yes, I see a little of your future," Robin answered casually to Yunshi and quietly paid her attention to Golden Crow Princess. Sure enough, the closer she was, the nobler she could feel from the golden-haired princess, which was totally inconsistent with the information in the task introduction. However, the unfortunate prophecy of the robin would never make any mistakes. It would definitely be achieved. If it really couldn't be achieved, for example, to curse a legend-ranked being, the robins wouldn't make any prediction. Once the robins predicted, it would become a reality. The targets were already destined to die, and she just lightly gave them a push. From this point of view, Robin was not a murderer, but a witness who saw the bloody death. She just shortened the target's death time and triggered something that would take 10 or 20 years to happen in advance. My future. What is it like? Yunshi looked hopefully at the mysterious augur in front of him. Oh, so I still have a future. As a man who had 4 ex-girlfriends, who was torn apart in his past life, he still had a future. That's really a piece of good news. Well, your future. In fact, Robin wasn't really going to predict for him, but looking at his eyes full of expectations, she sighed. Unlucky people are everywhere. She could see it from the maid's eyes, that she had a miserable past, just like herself. Similarly afflicted people pity each other. Sigh, let me predict for you, unlucky person. It won't be the unfortunate prophecy of the robin, but a real divination that belonged to the mysterious prediction. The unfortunate prophecy of the robin was a special killing secret skill of mysterious prediction, a power that could lead all things to death. The dead robin hated everything in the world and cursed everything in the world. Only those who listened to the moan of the robin in the pool of blood could get the power of the robin. Even among all the secret skills of Bloodstamen, this was the most horrible secret killing skill. Its origin could be traced back to the twilight of the gods, which triggered the death of the Child of Light. The Child of Light was an optimistic young man, the son of the Lord God. The 3 goddesses, Norn the god of wisdom, predicted that nothing in the world could harm the Child of Light. All the gods and all the living beings in the world swore that they would never hurt the Child of Light. Only a throne on the edge of the world didn't swear, because it was forgotten by everyone. In the end, the blessed Child of Light eventually died under a weapon made of this thorn, falling down in a pool of blood like a robin. The gods tried to save the dead Child of Light, and Osiris, the god of death, said that as long as all living beings cried for the Child of Light, he could revive again. However, a devil disguised to be an old woman and refused to cry for the Child of Light. In the end, the Child of Light really died. Then, the twilight of the gods was coming. The killed robin represented this irreversible tragedy and the deepest despair. Listening to the robin's voice, and she brought the robin out of the nightmare world, she was destined to walking onto such a road of no return. Even gods couldn't change the fate of the robin, and their trying finally became the origin of the twilight of the gods. Robin's death was doomed, as this road she chose, which could only lead to an end full of blood and death. Bloodstamens represented such a road, the most terrible, cruel, and powerful road in the 10 Leaves Alliance. Let me see your hand. Robin gently grabbed Yunshi's hand. It was a hand that was very soft without even a tiny scar. It was like a perfect white jade without any flaw. It was obvious that the owner of this hand didn't often work as an ordinary maid, because there was no callosity on her hand. Looking closely, the tenderness and smoothness of the skin were also not like what a maid could have. Didn't this maid need to do housework? No, just now. She was baking bread for the golden-haired princess, and her moves were very skillful. It was probably a gift from heaven. Well, what's wrong with my hand? She looked anxiously at the mysterious augur. Could it be that she found that he was not really a maid? At this time, he could only believe that his disguise was perfect. After all, no one in the Starwing Knights had found that he was a man, have they? Did they really find out? Remembering Lulu, Huayu, Lingling, and Meilong, Yunshi was not really confident about this. Are you happy? Robin's fingertips slipped through Yunshi's palm and asked solemnly. The divination had started. It wasn't the unfortunate prophecy of the Robin used for murder, but the real divination she mastered. She didn't choose to be the Robin from the beginning. Before she became a member of Bloodstamen, she had also dreamed to be a golden branch or a jade leaves. Unfortunately, she couldn't choose her fate. When she listened to the mournful song of robins and was curious to seed them, she was already unable to go back. I don't know. She hesitated. Is he happy or unhappy now? Compared with the time in the small town, when he worried about how to separate from Huahua, he and she still stayed together. From this angle of view, he was lucky. However, this luck was because of his misery in his past life. That night, under the starry sky, his ordinary life had faded away and would never return. From then on, he had to keep moving forward. He had to hide his true identity and escape from the pursuit of his 4 ex-girlfriends. If you don't know, you can ask your heart. You just need to give me an answer, Robin said with a soft voice, because it was the necessary procedure for her divination. Even if it wasn't for murdering, her prophecy needed to be close to the target before it could be triggered. Now she was in the second stage of her prophecy, feeling the target's fate. Do you accept you now? Yes, she just needed an answer. Most people felt that they were full of defects and regrets. This was a truth, because no one was perfect. Everyone would feel that they were not perfect. The question is whether you accept such a self and admit such an imperfect self. The gods of the Western Gods' domain told people that you were sinful. The saints, the Eastern Gods' domain, told people that human nature was evil. There was no right or wrong when referring to this question. When the answer came to your mind, you would find out if you had seen your own way. Well, I accept the current me. Yunshi nodded. Yes, he understood this question and knew why the mysterious augur in front of him asked it. Only by accepting who you are can you understand what you wanted to be, and the door of happiness will open for you. Are you happy? The answer was right in your own mind. In the small town, his ideal was to expand the small bread store and marry Huahua. It was him. In the water god's world, he married millions of brides and became the White Emperor. It was him. On the starry sky chessboard, he defeated all legend-ranked opponents and became the master of Star Go. It was him. From beginning to end, no matter how the environment changed and what happened, he was still himself. The Star Child, Yunshi. So, do you have anyone you like? Step by step, Robin began her divination. Only happy people had a future. Unfortunate people were destined to lose their future. All glory and hope wouldn't belong to unfortunate people. To truly capture that tiny miracle, people entangled in misfortune needed to work hundreds of times harder than others. Never give up hope until the last moment, which was the only belief that unfortunate people could have. The person who didn't have this belief was just a walking corpse, even though he was still alive. Robin's whine represented that it had not given up hope and was still emitting its own voice. As the person who could hear this voice, she must accomplish the Robin's hope. The person I like, Yunshi muttered to himself, but did not notice that at his side, Golden Crow Princess's eyes were burning with curiosity. White Lotus breathing was almost stopped. She looked at Yunshi's mouth without blinking, trying to read the name he would mutter out. Red Lotus doubtfully looked around and felt strange. What's happening? In this world, The people I like. She didn't notice that the atmosphere around him suddenly changed, because he was worried about how to answer the mysterious augure's question. In the sky, somehow one after another morning glow flew above their heads. People stared at the strange clouds that had never appeared in the sky before, and many people even knelt and kowtowed. May, who do you like? Golden Crow Princess asked word for word, as if the answer from she could determine many worlds' fates. May, tell me, is the name Hua? White Lotus narrowed her eyes and said the name of her biggest opponent. If she admitted, she wouldn't feel too surprised. A childhood sweetheart was a strong opponent, but not an invincible opponent. Even though she was unparalleled in battle, there were too many weaknesses in her character. A few days ago, White Lotus deceived this biggest rival by letting her take part in a special trial so that she could stay together with May these last days. Everything is because of the choice of fate, isn't it? Actually, She blushed for a while. Speaking of the people he liked, the first name that emerged in his mind was Hua. However, he hadn't seen Hua recently, which made him feel lonely. She was the bright sun in his eyes. If he could only live to 18 years old, he would propose to Hua at all costs and forget everything else. She was his first love, his childhood sweetheart. She had taken so many places in She's heart, and when he was still in the small town, he had even decided to travel after Hua left, in case that in the familiar environment, he saw the thing and thought of the person. Hua, is that the name? Robin looked at the maid strangely. Hua, the name didn't sound like a man's name. Well, I like my childhood sweetheart, Hua. Since White Lotus had asked, she wasn't going to keep hiding his real feeling. He directly admitted it. Even though he had married millions of brides, even though he had made a lot of mistakes, his first love was still his first love. His childhood sweetheart was still his childhood sweetheart. He never forgot Hua for a moment. After all, she was the most beautiful sun in his heart. So, there is another rival. Suddenly, the young Golden Crow Princess eyes became serious, and the name Hua had been deeply engraved into her mind. Hua, the childhood sweetheart, is really a strong rival. White Lotus squinted. She was glad that she had deceived Hua to leave, otherwise, she wouldn't have any chance to date May. Apparently, as the prince's lover, she had to fight fiercely with the prince's childhood sweetheart. This war had just begun. Then I will predict the future of you and your lover, Robin said with confidence. It was just an easy love fortune. After all, she had obtained the two sides' name and knew that they were childhood sweethearts. Wait! She looked at the mysterious augur and suddenly had an ominous feeling. The guardian of the balance, the observer of all things, the watcher at the end of the hourglass of time. In the name of me, praise you. I would like to pay all the prices I can pay to see the future. Tell me, if the childhood sweetheart of the person in front of me can get what he wants. Robin predicted and sought answers from the three saints in the void. The guardian of the balance, the observer of all things, the watcher at the end of the hourglass of time. The three saints were not gods, nor demons, nor any living beings in the real world, but a special concept, representing the different ways of manifesting the truth of all things. She sought the answer from the three non-existing saints, but most times, if the answer was accurate, it depended on luck. This time, Robin's luck was very good, at least she thought so, because she had seen some scenes after 3 seconds. Childhood sweetheart, sword, stars falling. What a strong female swordsman. Who is she? Childhood sweetheart, golden light, golden swords, and a garden with a giant obelisk. Well, how come there are 2 different futures? Childhood sweetheart, golden branches, jade leaves, blood stamens, blooming flowers between the heaven and the earth. Isn't this the 10 Leaves Alliance? Childhood sweetheart, countless mysterious war machines, and 1, 2, 3. More than 10 huge shadows. Wait, is there something wrong? How could this be her childhood sweetheart? By the way, how many childhood sweethearts does she have? 4 different scenes, 4 different futures. In the first future, The girl with a huge sword was wildly chopping off the stars. With each brandish of her sword, tens of millions of stars would fall down. In the second future, the golden sword turned into a sparkle covering the world, opening up a chaotic world. Light and darkness, sky and earth were separated by this sword. With a golden crown on her head, the girl looked like an invincible god. In the third future, a giant divine tree spread through the endless stars. Golden branches, jade leaves, and blood stamens were all parts of this divine tree. Countless spirits crowded around this divine tree, singing and praising it. With the crown of elf, a girl was sitting on the tree. In the fourth future, a tidal wave of steel was moving forward. Black anti-cross flags were floating in the air. Spirits lodging in crystals and a blonde-haired girl were ravaging the entire sky. Behind them were endless huge dark shadows. Numerous gods fell at their feet, witnessing the arrival of a new era. Why? It's supposed to be just a common love divination. Why do I see such terrible futures? Any occurrence of these four futures would become an event that could shock the entire endless gods' domains. And these four futures were connected with the black-haired maid in front of Robin. Who are your childhood sweethearts? What kind of monsters are they? Robin's face turned pale. She looked at Yun-Shi and wanted to say something, but suddenly, more and more terrible scenes flooded into her eyes. On the snow-covered land, a girl was leading a powerful legend-ranked knight regiment, fighting against the army of the demons. Walking on the battlefield, a god of war was killing. In the endless darkness, a princess ignited the lamp of hope. A rabbit-eared pharmacist was saving the world with various drugs. A singing girl was bringing hope to the depleted land by using her song. A dragon girl was standing on the top of a dragon's nest, and behind her was a huge group of dragons. It was hard to believe that these futures were all connected with the maid in front of her. She herself was like the center of a network, connecting countless futures. Each of the futures was a miracle, a legend. The vast net didn't just cover a sword domain nor a god's domains, but the endless stars. Stop. Stop. I can't look at these. The more she saw, the more uneasy Robin became. Why can I see such things? Why is this love divination involved with so many terrible futures? It was not something she, a hero-ranked augur, could withstand. Even for a legend-ranked augur, it wasn't possible for them to see these futures in a love divination. No, not that she saw the future, but that she was entangled in it. Why am I? Is today the last day of my life? To see so many futures, the price she would pay could only be with her life and even her soul. The people who peeped into destiny would pay the price of violating the rules. The more detailed and realistic the future was, the more expensive the price the peeper would pay. Am I dying? I just wanted to do a simple love divination. Master, she's dying. Mayer's voice sounded quietly in Yun-Shi's ear, which really frightened him. Gee? Why? Yun-Shi looked at the mysterious augur's pale face. He didn't know why, but he could feel that her vitality was declining rapidly. It seemed that she was dying. It was the price of predicting your future. She has overdrawn her life. She has already reached a certain critical point, and she still tried to predict your future. She is just looking for her own way of death. Tisk tisk. Mayer looked at Robin and shook her head. How dare you to predict the future of the Star Child? Even Ouroboros couldn't do it. You are just murdering yourself. This was only a simple love divination. If you went further and really saw Master's 4 ex-girlfriends, even your soul would immediately turn into ashes. What can I do? Looking at this unfortunate augur, Yun-Shi felt guilty. He himself didn't expect that predicting his future would make the augur pay the price with her life. It's very easy. Give her one of your seeds, Master. At least, it can keep her alive. Mayer secretly laughed. The reason why she did not stop the foolish augur predicting for her master was that she was waiting for this moment. Although her appearance wasn't too excellent, she could see a part of the Star Child's futures, which meant that she was really a genius of divination. Just in time, too, the Starwing Knights needed an augur. Okay, let me use it. Yun-Shi didn't doubt Mayer's words. He directly activated a seed and planted it into her body through his hand that was held by Robin's hand. Gee, Robin's body quivered slightly and found that her cold body was rapidly warming up. Just at that moment, she thought she had stepped into the netherworld, and she had even seen countless flowers blooming in the netherworld. They were the flowers that only the dead could see. The flowers bloomed in the garden where she first met with the robins. That was to say, she died again just now. Why did she say again? Because she had actually died once a long time ago. It was the robins who brought her back from the netherworld, and after that, she could never be separated from these birds. If she could choose, she would never have gone on the road of the blood stamen. Unfortunately, she had no choice. If she didn't choose to be with these robins, she could no longer survive. Even though she was so unfortunate, she still hoped to continue to live, even if there was only 0.0000001% possibility, she would not give up. The dead robins coexisted with her in this way, returning from the netherworld to the real world. Why? Looking at Yunshi's hand that was being held in her hand, Robin just wanted to open her mouth, and suddenly a rattle appeared in her mind. Ding! The first future she saw, the future belonging to Yunshi's first childhood sweetheart, broke open, turning into numerous fragments of crystals and completely disappearing from Robin's soul. As if it was an initial signal, the future of the second girl also broke. The third future broke. The fourth future broke. No, it wasn't that these futures had broken and disappeared, but that Robin's soul wasn't strong enough to carry the information contained in these futures. She wasn't qualified to peep into these futures now, even though these futures were not 100% likely to happen. Ultimately, she simply didn't have the ability to observe these futures. So, why could she see them? If Yunshi looked up at the sky now, he would find several small stars hanging shyly in a corner of the sky, blinking quietly. One after another, the mirrors of the future disappeared from Robin's mind. She couldn't even remember any of them now. Finally, there was only one mirror of the future that still existed in her mind. Because the future in this mirror was the only future she saw by using her own ability. What happened? Because she couldn't remember any of the futures before, Robin had forgotten what terrible scenes she had seen. Now, in front of her, there was only one mirror of the future. Her subconsciousness was telling her that this mirror was very important. She must open it and see what future it reflected. Her instinct was warning her that she better not open that mirror. Now, she should leave the mirror as soon as possible, or she would inevitably be involved in misery. Don't open it. Don't open it. It's a grave, an abyss, a curse. If you want to be more miserable, open it and die. 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 The birds on Robin's shoulders threatened and whined. Their euphemistic and beautiful voices became panicky. Robin hesitated for a moment and finally touched the mirror in his soul with her fingertips, because she had no choice. Once the divination was completed, no matter what the result was, the future had been determined. This result wouldn't change because of any person's will. At least, she herself didn't have the power to change it. If it was a good future, then she could let out a sigh of relief. If it was a bad future, at least, she could look for ways to make some changes to avoid the worst results. The conclusion was that human curiosity was irresistible. It's too hot. The sun shone through the shadows of the tree, casting light spots on the ground of the small shrine. Even though she was hiding under the shady stairs that weren't exposed to the sun, Robin couldn't stand the intense heat. Normally, she would take off the bright red cloak at this time. After all, it was summer and she wasn't in the desert. Unfortunately, Robin really couldn't take it off. In a sense, this cloak was actually a part of her body and a carrier of the Robin's soul. It was equivalent to her eternally bound soul equipment. It was her god weapon, Blood Robin's cloak. Of course, it was still possible to take off this equipment for a short time, but she had no other clothes except the necessary underwear. No matter how hot it was, she couldn't accept only wearing her underwear in front of others, which was too embarrassing for her. Little Robin, is May there? Robin felt like she had heard this question more than once today. This time, it was a girl wearing platinum armor, her breastplate engraved with sacred cross lines that stood tall on the front of her breastplate, making people feel hot and seductive. She's supposed to be taking a bath. I saw her walking into the bathroom. Answering this question, Robin suddenly felt as if she should take a bath too. Thank you. Here you are. Huayu handed Robin an ice cream, which she had just bought. Ice cream. Robin grabbed it without saying anything and licked the luxurious goods in the hot sunshine with her little tongue. Such peace. Such a leisurely scene. Robin looked at her defenseless, cheerful future self, showing a deep, doubtful expression on her face. I'm entangled by the Robin and destined to be unfortunate. How can I show such a smile in this future? Why did the rabbit-eared girl and the night girl accept her and talk to her in such a natural way? What happened 1 year later? What made me take off my disguise? What happened to the assassination target I chose? Numerous questions emerged in Robin's mind, but she couldn't find answers from her future self, who just walked into the small shrine while sucking the ice cream in her mouth. Before she had taken a few steps, she suddenly stopped and cocked her ears. The Robin in the real world opened her eyes wide, because this posture meant that her future self was entering her unique combat posture. Die, die, die. The bloody birds sprang up with their wings and made the cry of blood that only Robin could hear. You can't see, you can't listen. If you look, you'll rot your eyes. If you listen, you'll rot your ears. Close your eyes and cover your ears. There are terrible monsters, and people who see monsters will be eaten by them. It seemed that the future Robin also heard this voice. She hesitated for a while, but eventually walked to the shrine. In the guest room of the shrine, there was a small room with the fragrance of green herbs, and there was a hushing voice that could make people blush. I'm going to have to make medicine, May. Robin looked quietly through the crack in the door. The rabbit-eared girl who had just been carrying a basket had been pressed into the corner of the wall. Her snow-white skin was covered with drops of fragrant sweat. Her scattered black hair draped over her shoulders. Her delicate face showed both excitement and fatigue. Her cheeks were glittering and ruddy, her mouth slightly open, and her discombobulated eyes were immersed in a chaotic pleasure. Her white and delicate feet had been grasped by someone, and on her delicate skin, there were several shallow scratch marks. Her delicate toes stretched straight, and the light in the room glistened on her lovely, rabbit-like toes, reflecting an attractive glow. Apparently, she was being forced by someone, but her red face was full of contented joy. Her beautiful eyes gazed at the man who took off her shoes and socks and kneaded her delicate, fragrant feet. Why, it's her. May. Robin looked at the black-haired maid in surprise. She never thought that it would be like this. Oh, whoa. I'm not ready for it yet. Lulu's eyes closed shyly, and her delicate nose was covered with sweat. Her attractive lips were gasping with a faint fragrance. Uh, 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 um, um, uh, 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 Hey, with all sorts of gentle, sexual cries, the little rabbit Lulu's body exuded a soft and moist, charming luster. What the hell is this future? Why am I, a top-class killer, shamelessly peeping at such a scene? What's wrong with the world? Looking at the scene in front of her, Robin felt that her world outlook was collapsing. Starwing Nights, the Robin in the real world instantly remembered this name. Is this the organization I joined in this future I see? This name was very strange. Didn't the whole of the Knights have even a single male? The Robin in this future licked her ice cream, which was about to melt completely, then licked the new ice cream from Huayu. Her ears rose back quietly and listened to the sweet words of the summer. Neither the Heaven Roads Palace nor the Ten Leaves Alliance would teach this kind of knowledge. Little Rabbit, she is the most special one. She's very good-natured. So she doesn't refuse May every time. So, if this happens again, would you please help me to cover it up? Anyway, You are one of the strongest hero-ranked members of the Starwing Knights. I'm just one of the strongest. In that case, the Starwing Knights has more than one hero-ranked members, and it's obvious that it's just a newly established knight. From the point of view of a killer, the Robin in the real world gave a high rating to the Starwing Knights. However, why did I join the Starwing Knights? I'm a killer of the Ten Leaves Alliance and a member of the Heaven Roads Palace. I just came to the White Lotus Sword domain to perform an assassination mission. Why would I join this strange Starwing Knights and become so familiar with this golden-haired girl and the little rabbit in the room? After merging with Robin's, she had become a moving disaster. Most people around her would naturally meet misfortune. How could such a girl have any close friends? If she is really my friend in this future, shouldn't I keep my distance from her? She knew that she would only bring misfortune to her friends. Well, I'll keep it secret. Actually, I was also accidentally. The Robin in this future muttered and mumbled and even blushed. Gee, accidentally? What happened accidentally? Hello. What happened to this me in this future? Oh my, you. May, Hua Yu rubbed her forehead and began to take out a small notebook, updating the list of May poisoning in the Starwing Knights. Her holy beetle didn't record it, so it must have happened at a place she didn't know about. Essentially, once May put her hand to the members of the Starwing Knights, none of them could escape. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.